Chapter 132. With Andre's current status and rank as a mage, if word got out that he wanted to take in servants, even nobles would do everything in their power to send their children to him. Without any hesitation, Eunice knelt down on one knee and used the dagger she always carried to cut open her palm. She squeezed out some blood and said in a very low voice, "I hereby swear that I am willing to give you all my loyalty and soul. I promise that I will not disobey any of your orders until the moment of my death. I accept your loyalty and grant you protection. At the same time, I am willing to provide you with blood filled with magic energy." As he spoke, Andre bit his finger and dipped it in the blood from Methraia's palm. He quickly completed the level 0 arcane spell secret mark and branded a slightly open eye on Methraia's forehead. This was an obvious secret mark that would always exist on the forehead. Anyone who saw it would know that this half-demon was the personal property of a certain mage. As for mages, they could roughly see the strength of the owner through the secret mark. Normally, having it was like having a protective amulet. As long as it wasn't an enemy or someone who was deliberately looking for trouble, no one would take the initiative to cause trouble. Of course, this ritual wasn't just for show. It was a very simple magic ritual. After the ritual was completed, a portion of the other party's blood would be in the body of the other party. If one party broke the contract, then the punishment would follow. Although it wouldn't be fatal, it wouldn't be good. Gently touching the mark on her forehead, Eunice instantly smiled. She then grabbed Andre's hand and gently kissed the ring on his finger. "From now on, you are my master. If you need anything, just let me know. Let's talk about your various abilities first. I need to have a general understanding so that I can customize some equipment for you." As he spoke, Andre pulled up Taflin, who was kneeling in front of him. After signing the contract, the relationship between the two parties had become much closer. He knew that he didn't have to be wary of Taflin escaping or playing tricks in the short term. He planned to properly equip this half-demon with decent combat strength. Ability? Eunice touched the small horn on her forehead and recalled for a few seconds. I know a lot of things. First, I use my innate spell charm person once a day. Then, I'm good at using all kinds of weapons, especially soft whips. I also know a little about pickpocketing and picking locks. As for armor, I don't really like heavy plate armor and breastplates. I prefer leather armor, chainmail, or not wearing any armor at all. Of course, there's also a transformation ability. Andre couldn't help but shake his head after listening to the messy skills. There was no other reason. It was simply too messy. There were spell-like abilities, thief skills, and also decent melee abilities. Perhaps for a person who had been wandering around for a long time, the more skills they mastered, the more likely they would be able to survive. However, if they wanted to obtain more and stronger combat power, it was best to choose a path and walk down it unswervingly. After all, no matter how much of a genius a person was, there was a limit to their energy. It was impossible for them to be well-versed in everything. The end result of being proficient in everything was often sloppy. It seems that you haven't received any real professional training. How about this? Think about it carefully for the next few days. Do you want to become a warrior, a thief, or try to activate the power of the demon in your body and become a warlock? Andre patted Eunice's shoulder and stepped forward to open the door of the room. In his mind, no matter which profession Taflin chose, he would be able to complement him very well. In the future, he wouldn't always be at a disadvantage in battle. "Andre, you're finally here. Hurry up and tell me what's going on outside. I could still hear fierce shouts 10 minutes ago. Heavens, where are your hair and eyebrows? And what's with the bandages on your shoulder? Are you injured?" As soon as she saw Andre walk in through the door, Chloe jumped up from her chair and rushed forward to ask him questions. Her two big eyes were full of concern. Hearing the young girl's cry, Elsa and Beverly, who were taking a nap, hurriedly opened their eyes and ran over to ask him questions. As the saying goes, a woman is equal to 300 ducks, and 2.5 women are equal to 750 ducks. They instantly surrounded Andre, constantly checking his body to see if there were any other wounds. Even the little lowly took out her handkerchief and helped wipe the burned skin on his head. Although he knew that they were concerned about his safety, being touched by two beautiful women and with a little fellow next to them, Andre suddenly felt a little overwhelmed. He hurriedly took 2 steps back and helplessly explained, "Don't worry, I'm fine. My hair and eyebrows were burned by the fire, and I broke a bone in my shoulder. Tomorrow, I'll send someone to Lincoln City to get a priest to treat it. Also, I have good news for you. The barbarians besieging the castle have been defeated by the reinforcements sent from the city. You can now rest well." They won. Goddess of dawn above. I can finally have a good sleep. Chloe, who had been on tenterhooks for most of the night, immediately patted her chest and relaxed. Elsa also hurriedly took out an amulet from the cleavage on her chest and kissed it. She very sincerely prayed, "Goddess bless you. Thank you for the miracle that has allowed everyone to be safe." As for the little lowly, who didn't understand the cruelty of war, she directly took off her shoes and socks and got into bed with a whoosh, comfortably falling asleep. Her slightly chubby face looked so cute that one couldn't help but want to pinch it. Seeing that everything was fine, Andre was also relieved. He kissed Chloe and Elsa's foreheads and reminded them, "Have a good rest. Tomorrow, we'll go to the village in the valley to take a look. Remember, don't go to the top of the castle because there are a lot of blood and corpses there." Chloe nodded lightly. "I know. I'm very sleepy, so I'll go to sleep first. See you tomorrow." After saying that, she tiptoed and kissed Andre's cheek, then ran to the other bedroom to sleep. As the door was closed, only the little lowly and the lone man and woman were left in the room. The atmosphere instantly became ambiguous, especially when Elsa's face was red, and her purple dress was emitting waves of the unique charm of a young married woman. Coupled with her expression of wanting to reject, Andre suddenly couldn't control himself. He stretched out his uninjured arm and pulled the young widow into his embrace, fiercely kissing her seductive red lips. Chapter 133. At first, Elsa was a little shy and resistant, but she soon fell deep into it. After a while, not only did she throw away all her reservations, she even took the initiative to open her mouth and stick out her tongue. She hadn't touched a man since her husband's death, and she had long been aroused. Coupled with the shock she received today, she especially wanted someone to protect her, so she completely exploded. As the saying goes, when dry wood meets fire, the two completely lost control, and their movements became more and more intense. Soon, the room began to reverberate with heavy breathing and light moans. Andre, who was in puberty, had very little self-control in this aspect. One of his hands had already reached into her skirt, and just as he was about to invade the mysterious area, Elsa suddenly clamped her legs together. While panting heavily, she lowered her voice and said, "No, not now. You're still injured." Damn it, this injury really came at a bad time. Seeing that the cooked duck had flown away, Andre couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He seemed to be a little irritable. Men who were dissatisfied with their desires generally had a bad temper, and he was no exception. "Don't worry, there will be opportunities in the future. You should go and recover first. I'll be right here, and I won't run away." Elsa comforted after tidying up her messy clothes and hair, blushing. Ever since piercing through that thin layer of paper, she instantly became radiant. Perhaps it was because of lust, but her skin showed the rosy color of a young girl. "Ah, all right. Remember, from today onwards, you belong to me." With that said, Andre hugged the young widow's slender waist and kissed her deeply on the neck. After that, he reluctantly opened the door and walked out. Although he was a little unwilling, he knew that it was absolutely not suitable for him to do intense activities now. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the fixed bones were dislocated. After all, even if he was treated with divine spells, he still had to ensure that the bones were not crooked. Otherwise, even if it was fixed, it would still be deformed. As soon as they returned to the dim corridor, Eunice, who had been waiting for a long time at the door, immediately followed them. She looked at them with a very ambiguous gaze, then licked her lips seductively and asked, "My dear master, you seem to need a good release. Do you need my help? You should know that I have mastered some special techniques." Her actions instantly enraged Andre, who was already a little annoyed. He grabbed Tayflin's tail and slapped it hard on its round buttocks. "Ha! Ah!" Eunice, who was suddenly attacked, screamed involuntarily. She immediately covered her mouth and became much more obedient. He didn't know if she was a masochist, but after being hit, there was a trace of lust in her eyes. When she walked, her two slender legs subconsciously tightened. From time to time, she would bite her lips with her teeth, as if suppressing the impulse in her heart. However, Andre had completely calmed down after the night breeze blew past the window. He ignored the half-demon's teasing and went straight into a bedroom. He took off his clothes and boots and fell into a deep sleep on the bed. He had used up almost all of his spell slots in the battle at night. Every few minutes, he would feel a sharp pain in his head. This was caused by overcasting spells, and it was also a warning signal sent by his brain. Although spell slots represented the limit of the number of arcane spells a mage could cast, very few mages would use up all of their spell slots. This was because it would cause a serious overdraft of mana in the brain. It would be fine if it was just 1 or 2 times, but in the long run, not only would it cause irreparable damage to the body, but it would also slowly reduce one's intelligence. Intelligence was one of the most important attributes for a mage. It was related to memory, logical thinking, abstract thinking, learning ability, the speed of preparing arcane spells, and so on. Most importantly, it was related to the number of spell slots. It could be said that it was the number one attribute for a mage. Andre had no choice but to put his life on the line. Otherwise, all the residents of the valley would be slaughtered. Now that he had done what he needed to do, he left the rest of the trivial matters to the others to take care of. Meanwhile, he dove into his bed and let his brain rest. He didn't plan on using any arcana techniques for at least 2 days. Just as he was falling asleep, Anthony was standing on the top floor of the castle under the moonlight, looking down at the barbarians who had been tied up into bundles. Although these fellows were arrogant and courageous in battle, their brains weren't very good. Once they lost, they naively believed that they were weak. In the barbarians' creed, it was only natural for the strong to rule over the weak. As such, they were very easy to tame. With a little training, they would be the best cannon fodder. They were always in short supply in the slave market. This time, they had captured over 1,200 of them. It could be said that they had made a fortune. If they were to transport them back, the entire Linton city would be in an uproar. All the major families would definitely fork out their wealth to purchase these simple-minded but powerful barbarian warriors. What a sight! I've been fighting for so many years, but this is the first time I've captured so many barbarians. Also, the Shifts tribe that dominated the forest is done for. After losing so many warriors, the smaller tribes they suppressed will definitely take this opportunity to attack us. They won't be a threat to us for the next few years. As a knight captain, Arlen's strategic vision wasn't bad. He could tell at a glance that this was the biggest gain of this battle. He could already imagine that when these barbarians were brought back and he took out Ogre King's head, the city hall would have to give him a hereditary noble title. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. Since Linton City was only a coastal city-state, it didn't occupy much land. Thus, it had always been a policy of giving money where it could. Only with great contributions would the knights be promoted. As for the titles donated by merchants, they could only be maintained for 1 generation and couldn't be passed down to future generations. The thoughts of the ruling class had always been very clear, and that was to maintain the number of nobles at an average level as much as possible, neither too many nor too few. The only ones who could receive preferential treatment were the mages, but they also had to make some contributions in order to receive hereditary titles and fiefs. Anthony stroked the stubble on his chin and nodded in agreement. It's a good thing that the barbarians are busy with their internal strife. At the very least, the safety of the caravans has increased. We don't have to worry about them raiding the surrounding villages and manors. By the way, how much profit do you think we can make by bringing these barbarians back to the city? Chapter 134. Arlen squinted his eyes and calculated for a long time. He finally smiled and replied, "There are more than 1,200 people. If we sell each barbarian slave for 300 gold, we'll make a profit of at least 360,000 gold coins. Of course, some of the higher-ranked warriors will be even more expensive. However, the slave trade is taxed at 50%, so we'll only get around 180,000 gold coins. 70% of that will go to Sir Andre. He's really made a fortune this time. Feudal knights were not warriors whose brains were filled with muscles. There were many things that they needed to learn. Among them, managing a territory and arithmetic were the most important. Some nobles could even compose poems and compose music. Otherwise, how could they become the perfect lovers in the eyes of countless commoner girls? 130,000 gold coins? That doesn't sound like a lot. Anthony muttered to himself. He then took out a piece of parchment and carefully looked at the list on it. This was a list that Andre had drawn up after the battle. It was filled with tools, resources, and slaves that needed to be purchased. He discovered that the location of his manor was a little dangerous, so he had to develop it as soon as possible. Both the population and the land had to be increased, and the remaining land couldn't be wasted. He had to plant alfalfa and develop animal husbandry. At the very least, he had to ensure that he could resist the invasion of enemies. Hearing his old friend's muttering, Arlen couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Friend, 130,000 gold coins is a huge sum of money. I don't even know if all my properties together are worth that much. Even the four dukes would feel their hearts beat faster if they heard this. How can you say that it's not a lot? Anthony sighed and explained, You'll understand if you look at this list. Sir Andre intends to develop the land in Tue's Valley, so he's planning to buy 1,000 to 2,000 slaves who can farm. Apart from that, he also wants to buy a large number of cows, horses, sheep, chickens, ducks, geese, pigs, and so on. 130,000 gold coins might not be enough. Oh my gods, this was truly a crazy move. If we succeed, this place will definitely become the richest manor in the vicinity of Lincoln City. Arlen couldn't help but exclaim after looking at the list. One had to know that slaves were not cheap. Even the lowest serf cost 30 to 50 gold coins. 2,000 serfs would cost 60 to 100,000 gold coins. A dairy cow would cost 10 gold coins. A beef cow would cost 15 gold coins. Goats and sheep would be slightly cheaper at 1 to 2 gold coins each. Pigs would cost 3 gold coins each. As for qualified hunting dogs and war horses, their prices would be terrifying. The former would cost 25 gold coins each, while the latter would cost 50 to 100 gold coins each. The price of heavy war horses would be 4 times higher at 200 to 400 gold coins each. In fact, most of the cavalrymen rode on light war horses that cost less than 100 gold coins. Only the real feudal knights could afford to ride heavy war horses, and each of them treasured them greatly. Usually, they would feed them with all kinds of good things, and when they charged, they would do their best to protect their mounts to prevent injuries or disabilities. It could be said that if Andre's order was completed in one go, it would cost at least 200 to 250,000 gold coins. There weren't many families in Lincoln City that could take out such a large sum of money. Anthony smiled wryly and patted his forehead with a sigh. Yes, I was shocked when I first saw it, but when I thought about Tue's Valley's location, I understood. Even if we have the geographical advantage, we can't have less than 200 soldiers. Otherwise, if something like tonight happens, we won't be able to hold on. Since we want to raise soldiers, we naturally have to increase the output of the manor. The farmland we've developed is far from enough, so it's reasonable to buy a large number of slaves. Huh, you're thinking too much. You're like an internal affairs official. Could this be Countess Anastasia's arrangement? Arlen asked with a playful expression. Anthony smiled and shook his head in response to his old friend's teasing. No, it's because of Miss Chloe. She's now completely in love. This means that Sir Andre is likely to marry into the Mariel family and become an important figure in the Greensea Alliance. Arlen was shocked when he heard this. He hurriedly asked, Are you sure? Doesn't Miss Chloe always ignore men? Why? Why would she suddenly? I'm not too sure what's going on, but ever since Miss Chloe was rescued, she's been talking about Sir Andre nonstop, no matter if she's eating, sleeping, reading, or drinking tea. She's been talking about the battle at least a dozen times. It's like she's been possessed. Anyone who isn't blind can see her mental state recently. Anthony replied helplessly. He didn't understand that Chloe's behavior was actually due to a severe mental stimulation that resulted in a psychological dependence. In addition, she'd heard too many heroic stories from bards, so she'd given herself some hints in her heart. In essence, this was a variant of Stockholm Syndrome. It was just that Andre had appeared at a more opportune time, so she'd inexplicably become the target of dependence. It had to be said that if he'd appeared a little earlier or a little later, this situation wouldn't have happened. Everything was just a coincidence. Sigh. He's really a lucky man. He's able to obtain the love of a beautiful girl and the enormous wealth and influence of the Mariel family. Congratulations, old friend. As long as Sir Andre and Miss Chloe end up together, you'll definitely be put in an important position. A trace of envy appeared in Arlen's eyes as he spoke. As a good friend who'd climbed up from the bottom of society, he'd always left Anthony far behind. However, today he was finally starting to feel jealous of Anthony's opportunities. After all, being a retainer of a great noble was far better than being a public servant. The former would be protected, while the latter would have to rely on oneself. Anthony smiled as he ran his fingers through his hair. He couldn't help but smile faintly. It's still too early to talk about this. Oh, right. Remember to invite a priest when you go back. Sir Andre's bones are injured, and he needs a priest to treat them. No problem. I promise to invite a priest with superb healing skills. I'm going back with the army now. Take care of yourself. Having said that, Arlen opened his arms and gave Anthony a hug. He then left the castle with his knights, carrying the bundled barbarian captives as they walked towards Lincoln City. Chapter 135. Even though it was nighttime, they had won a glorious victory and had captured a lot of loot. After selling the captives to the slave merchants, everyone would be able to obtain a considerable amount of extra income. Therefore, their morale was high, and they did not show any signs of fatigue. Watching the reinforcements gradually disappear into the distance, Anthony immediately ordered the militia to pull up the drawbridge, lower the iron gate, and close the gate. He then began to wash the bloodstains on the castle. The 50 slave soldiers were also divided into 4 teams and took turns to patrol to prevent any sneak attacks. After everything was arranged, he yawned and went to the bedroom closest to the top floor of the castle. He fell asleep immediately, and after a while, deafening snoring could be heard. Late at night, the bright moonlight shone on the ground. Just as everything fell into silence, a dark shadow suddenly rushed out from behind the entrance of the valley. He stared at the castle fiercely for a few seconds, then cursed in a low voice. Damn it. The plan failed again. These barbarians are simply idiots. Idiots. Even with such a huge advantage, they still couldn't complete the mission. Now that things have come to this, I can only go back and report. I hope the master won't be too angry. After venting, he took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Then, he took out a badge with a scorpion tail pattern engraved on it. He gently touched the dark green gem inlaid on it and instantly disappeared on the spot. Maybe the enemy had no backup plan, or maybe they were preparing for a bigger move. But the latter half of the night was unusually quiet. There wasn't even the sound of wild beasts, and it passed peacefully just like that. Andre, who had cast too many spells, was in a daze. He didn't know how long he slept until a hurried knock on the door woke him up completely. Lifting his uninjured arm, he rubbed his eyes slightly and asked loudly, "Who is it?" "Master, a priest called Crystal said she was invited to treat you." Eunice's voice came from outside the door. Hearing that it was the person who was going to treat him, Andre immediately replied, "Come in. The door isn't locked." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open. A mature woman in silver armor took the lead and walked in. It was the priest from the Temple of Dawn who had been treating him. Teflon followed closely behind like an obedient child. He didn't show any disrespect at all. "Hello, madam. We meet again. Please forgive me for not being able to express my respect to you right now." Andre greeted her in a self-deprecating tone. He felt that the half-demon state was a little strange, but considering that there were outsiders present, he didn't ask. Crystal took off her helmet and iron gloves and joked, "It's fine. You just need to prepare 400 gold coins. Fractures require a level 3 divine spell, heal serious wounds. But to be honest, the frequency of your injuries is really frightening. It's only been a few days, and you've already received treatment 3 times. Andre shrugged with a wry smile. I can't help it. I feel like I'm a troublemaker now. Wherever I go, I'll run into some dangerous things. I'm sure you've heard that 2,000 people appeared here last night and launched a fierce attack on the castle. I'm lucky to be alive, not to mention a small injury. I've heard that it's the work of a fanatical demon cult. The paladins in the church have already been invited by the Duke to investigate. I'm sure it won't be long before they find some clues. As soon as the poisonous tail hook was mentioned, the priest's expression instantly became serious. Her eyes were as sharp as knives, completely unlike the gentle look she had in the church. I hope so, but in my opinion, this matter won't be so easy to solve because it's not a simple attack or kidnapping. It's a huge scheme. The target isn't limited to Lincoln City, but the entire Green Sea Alliance. Forget it. It's useless to talk about this now. I'm sure the Dukes have already started the investigation. First, help me fix these damn bones. They've been hurting for the whole night. Having said that, Andre lifted the blanket to reveal his upper body full of wounds. It had to be said that in this world without plaster and anesthesia, breaking bones was like torture. As long as he moved a little, he would immediately feel a piercing pain. He just wanted to end this pain as soon as possible. Not to mention a mere 400 gold coins. Even if it was 4,000 gold coins, he would not hesitate to agree. Goddess of Dawn above, how'd you get these wounds? Oh, my God. Scratch marks. Bite marks. These are all wounds caused by wild beasts. Crystal covered her mouth and exclaimed. Like most people, she couldn't accept that a mage had so many scars on his body, especially when he was still far from being a minor. Andre smiled indifferently. It's nothing. In my hometown, hunting dangerous beasts is a symbol of bravery and recklessness. Hurry up and fix my bones. He also knew that the crisscrossing scars on his body would easily attract attention, so he didn't want to talk too much about what happened in Lonely Mountain Town. If he was exposed, many people would associate the secret mark on his forehead with the infamous Ulysses. By then, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. You're a mage, not a warrior. Even if you want to show off, you should show off your intelligence, not your courage. The female priest muttered as she carefully removed the bandages. After making sure that the bones were fixed properly, she immediately entered a spell-casting state. In just a few seconds, a gentle white light was released from her palms. She didn't hesitate to use her glowing hands to lightly brush over his collarbone and shoulder blade. In the blink of an eye, everything was restored to normal, as if it had never been broken. Andre hurriedly climbed out of bed and tried to move his injured shoulder. He found that the injury that should have taken 100 days to heal had healed so quickly, and there were no aftereffects. It was like turning something rotten into something miraculous. It was no wonder that priests were always respected by everyone. Just this healing spell alone was enough to make countless commoners worship them, even though they might not be able to enjoy such expensive treatment in their lifetime. After the spell casting, Crystal silently prayed to the goddess of dawn, Lucia, and quickly reminded him, be careful. Although your shoulder has been fixed, it will take at least a week or so for it to completely heal. During this time, drink more bone broth and milk, and don't do any strenuous exercise. I don't want to suddenly hear that you're injured when we're exploring the underground city next month. Chapter 136. Don't worry. I'll stay here and recuperate. I won't cause any trouble, Andre promised in a half-joking tone. What he needed to do next was to modify his farming tools and promote new methods of planting and fertilizing. He wanted to make this huge valley his foundation in this world. According to the area marked on the map, this manor was basically an endless plain. As long as he had enough manpower, he could develop at least 1 million acres of farmland. In addition to the large grassland and the lake in the central area, he could form a semi-enclosed, independent kingdom. It wouldn't be a problem for hundreds of thousands of people to live here. Of course, all of this was only on paper. Since there were only 240 households here, the area for farming was very small. It could only sustain the expenditure of the castle's garrison. The tenants only had enough to eat and wear. They didn't have much spare money at all. This could be seen from the clothes of the militia. The most important thing now was to find a way to get enough manpower before the spring plowing. Otherwise, all of his plans would be in vain. He could only watch as large areas of good land were overgrown with weeds. Apart from that, he also needed to plan the animal husbandry. There were already some livestock and poultry in the valley. Now that he had the slave warriors from the grassland kingdom, he could naturally increase the number of livestock. He believed that in a few years, cattle and sheep would be spread all over the valley and become the largest meat producer in Lincoln City. Just as Andre was thinking about his plan, Crystal, who had been standing on the side for a long time, couldn't bear it anymore. She coughed hard and said, "Cough. Cough, cough. Oh, sorry, I was a little too engrossed in my thoughts." Andre, who came back to his senses, was a little embarrassed. He hurriedly apologized and waved at Tavelin at the same time. "Eunice, take this lady to the treasury to get 400 gold coins." "Yes, master." "Madam, please follow me." The half-devil gestured for her to follow him and led the way. Crystal glanced at Eunice's enchanting back and smirked. She lowered her voice and said meaningfully, "I really didn't expect you to have such a hobby when you're still underage. You even took in a Tavelin as a servant." Hearing this, Andre immediately shook his head with a bitter smile. "Whether you believe it or not, there's nothing between me and her. There's never been any relationship between master and servant." He felt that he was the perfect example of being unjustly implicated this time. He had been abstinent ever since Serena left, and he almost made the young and seductive widow his own yesterday. However, he failed at the last moment, and he didn't know when he would have another chance next time. As for Eunice, it was completely out of good intentions, and there was nothing else mixed in it. He didn't know what this female priest brain was made of. Don't explain. I have no intention of interfering with your private life." After saying that, Crystal winked playfully like a young girl and turned around to leave the room. She followed Teflon to withdraw the money. Less than 2 minutes after she left, Chloe, Elsa, and Beverly appeared at the door. Andre, who had just dressed up, asked with a smile, "How was it? Did you sleep well last night?" "Not bad. Without those Rue barbarians, I fell asleep very quickly. I didn't wake up until half an hour ago. Tell me, what are your plans for today?" Perhaps it was because she had a good rest, but Chloe regained her usual vigor. Her 2 beautiful big eyes revealed a trace of excitement. In contrast, Elsa's appearance was much worse. Not only were there dark circles under her eyes, but her face was also a little gloomy. It was obvious that she didn't have a good rest. It was very likely caused by the kissing and touching last night. As for the little Loli, she was completely carefree. She followed her mother and looked around, very curious about the structure of the castle. "Plans? I plan to wash up first, have breakfast, and then ride around the valley. If you're interested, you can come along. Bring 2 crossbows and a few arrows. I heard from the militia that there are often wild beasts near the lake in the center of the basin. We can also hunt on the way." Andre didn't even think about it and directly told them the entire itinerary. What he wanted to do today was to observe the terrain and the farming methods of the tenants. He wanted to find out the areas that needed to be improved. Observing the surrounding terrain, he wanted to distinguish which areas were suitable for farming and which areas were suitable for grazing. In addition, he also wanted to develop a water system. After all, there was a large lake in the center of the valley. It was estimated that it was formed by the accumulation of rainwater over the years. It would be a waste if it wasn't used properly. When she heard about hunting, Chloe's eyes instantly revealed a look of surprise. She jumped up happily. "Wow, hunting, that's great. I love hunting the most. Anyway, I have to hurry and prepare the things. See you downstairs in a while." After she finished speaking, she lifted her skirt and hurriedly disappeared at the end of the corridor. It seemed that she was either going to change her clothes or to choose a bow. Perhaps because of her guilty conscience, Elsa didn't speak after she entered the door and greeted him. She only lowered her head and didn't say a word. Instead, her daughter Beverly was unusually lively. She asked with a face full of excitement, "Teacher, can I go hunting too?" Glancing at the widow who was fiddling with the corner of her clothes, Andre smiled and stroked the little girl's hair. "Of course. Quickly change into comfortable clothes and pants, and change your wooden shoes into boots. We will set off after breakfast." "Hooray!" the little lowly shouted, and then ran down the stairs excitedly. She had always longed to see the world outside of Lincoln City, and today was such a good opportunity. Naturally, she was overjoyed. With Beverly's departure, the room became the same as last night. An ambiguous atmosphere quickly heated up. The young widow seemed to have foreseen something and subconsciously clamped her legs together. Her neck and face became a little red. Andre quickly closed the door, bolted it, and rushed up to Elsa to the bed. He kissed her passionately as he quickly unbuttoned the back of her skirt. In just half a minute, he had taken off the purple dress. He was already unable to hold back his thirst. He was like a ferocious beast, biting his prey to his heart's content. He didn't give the other party any chance to resist or refuse. "Stop. Don't. We will be discovered." Although Elsa also wanted to completely release her desires, she was relatively rational. She knew that it would be embarrassing if they were discovered by the passing soldiers and servants. Chapter 137. However, Andre was already burning with passion, and he couldn't listen to any of that. He forcefully separated the young widow's legs and couldn't wait to get to the point. As he was in his adolescence, he didn't have much self-control in this aspect. Moreover, the other party's rejection was only due to her shyness, and not because she didn't want to. As the saying goes, dry wood meets fire. A few minutes later, the sound of a man's heavy breathing and a woman's coquettish moans could be heard from the room. One of them was a widow who hadn't been nourished for a long time, while the other was a thirsty young man. Thus, their movements were extremely intense, and even the sound of banging could be heard outside the door. Fortunately, there was no one around, or else they would have been discovered. 20 minutes later, the two finally reached the shore of happiness at the same time. They hugged each other tightly for a full 2 minutes before slowly letting go. Andre, who had gotten what he wanted, gently kissed the young widow's forehead and asked with a smile, "How was it? Were you satisfied with my performance?" Elsa, who was sweating all over, lightly licked her dry lips and panted as she replied, "Of course I was satisfied. This is the happiest moment I've had in so many years. But you have to promise me that this relationship will never be known to anyone else." "Why?" Henry asked, puzzled. "Because I don't want to be gossiped about, and I don't have any improper thoughts about you. It's fine to just maintain this relationship." Having said that, Elsa climbed up from the bed and used the handkerchief she always carried to wipe away the sticky liquid that flowed out. As the daughter of a bankrupt merchant, she had long seen through the fickleness of the world. As long as she maintained their relationship as lovers, she could think about other things in the future. After all, the difference in age and status between the two was too great, and it was impossible for them to be accepted by the nobles an hour and a half later. Beside the lake in the center of Two-Ways Valley, a valiant girl was riding on horseback. She knocked an arrow and aimed at a wild rabbit that was grazing on grass, and suddenly released a fatal arrow. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk with a piercing sound, the arrow accurately hit a wild chicken that was looking for food in the grass. "Aha! Look, I killed another prey," Chloe shouted excitedly as she waved the short bow in her hand. Henry, who was not far away, held back his laughter and nodded vigorously. "Yes, if you had aimed at a pheasant instead of a rabbit, you would have definitely become a godly archer." Along the way, he finally had a taste of this noble girl's strange archery skills. Others would shoot where she pointed, but she was good. No wonder when the guards heard that their young miss was going to hunt, they all brought a shield, afraid that they would be accidentally injured by the arrows flying around. However, Chloe didn't know how to aim. Although she always missed the target, she could always hit the surrounding beasts by mistake. The hunt had only started for less than an hour, and she had already hunted 2 pheasants and a fox. For a young girl, this was a very good result. Of course, this was also due to the help of the hunting dogs. The 20 dogs in the castle were all trained to be very fierce. Once they found prey, they would immediately bark and surround it, forcing the prey into a blind spot so that their master could shoot. Chloe was obviously not convinced by Andre's ridicule. She turned her head and pointed at the prey on the carriage. "Look, I have already hunted 3 prey, but you are still empty-handed. So you have no right to mock my archery skills." "Ha ha! All right, I guess I have to show you my skills to convince you." As he spoke, Andre picked up the short bow from the saddle and aimed at a deer that was grazing in the distance. Without hesitation, he shot a fatal arrow. Without any accident, the sharp arrow accurately pierced the neck of the prey. In an instant, a mournful cry sounded. The hunting dogs that had been waiting for a long time swarmed forward and directly pounced on the prey, pulling it back together. Although he hadn't used it many times, as a hunter, he had put in a lot of effort in this aspect. Although he couldn't be considered a godly archer, he was definitely 100 times better than the noble girls who lived like princes. "Oh, damn it. Haven't you always used a crossbow? Why are you so familiar with it?" Chloe asked with a face full of surprise. Normally, although mages would also learn to use a long-range weapon that was easy to use, such as a light crossbow, they would never choose a bow that required a long time to train. One had to know that training an archer required a few years. Mages didn't even have enough time to study magic. So how could they have the time to practice archery every day? That was why she was so surprised. Seeing the deer being carried by the guards onto the carriage, Andre put away the short bow and smiled. "It's nothing. In my hometown, almost everyone learns archery and hunting. My archery skills can only be considered as amateur. A truly skilled archer can even hit the eyes of a wild beast while running." Chloe's eyes widened as she exclaimed, "Really? Oh my God, that's too amazing." "Of course it's true. I saw with my own eyes a hunter who turned back and shot an arrow while running, directly hitting the right eye of a brown bear." Andre would never forget the thrilling scene of his first hunt. If it wasn't for a veteran hunter who happened to pass by, he would have been buried under the bear's mouth. "Teacher, I want to hunt too." Seeing the others drawing their bows and shooting arrows on horseback, Beverly was a little envious. She stared with her 2 big eyes and pretended to be pitiful. "Hee hee, you're too young now. You can't pull the bowstring, and you can't drive the horse by yourself. Just wait for the barbecue." Andre smiled as he stroked the little girl sitting in front of him. Because the exercise was a little intense an hour ago, and because Elsa hadn't been nourished for a long time, some parts of her body were a little injured. So she found an excuse to stay in the castle, and Andre took care of this little girl. As soon as he said that, the little girl's stomach began to rumble. Apparently, she was a little hungry. After all, everyone woke up a little late today, so breakfast was only a bowl of oatmeal and a piece of fried bacon. Riding a horse was a very energy-consuming activity, so it was inevitable that they would start to feel hungry when it was close to noon. As the saying goes, no matter how big the world is, eating is the most important thing. Since everyone was hungry, Andre didn't want to continue walking. He immediately waved to a slave soldier from the Kingdom of Brant. "Buzz, bring some people around and drive away those dangerous wild beasts. I don't want any accidents to happen during the picnic. Also, bring back some game while you're at it. 1 deer and 2 pheasants aren't enough for so many people." Chapter 138. As a hunter, he knew very well that fox meat was inedible without enough seasoning. The pungent smell was enough to make most people avoid it, so he didn't even mention it. "Don't worry, Master. We're the best hunters. We promise to bring back enough prey within 20 minutes. The burly man patted his chest as he spoke. He shook the reins and led his 10 companions into a mad gallop, charging towards the herd of deer not far away. After last night's fierce battle, the performance of these slave warriors had put Andre at ease. He equipped everyone with weapons and equipment. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly at how powerful the merchants were. He didn't know what kind of brainwashing method they used, but they could actually change a person's mind and make them loyal to their master. No wonder the slave trade in Lincoln City was so prosperous. Who wouldn't like loyal subordinates and servants who would never betray their master? Of course, this was only relative. After all, while brainwashing was powerful, it couldn't completely control the slaves. If the master beat and scolded the slaves for a long time, this illusory loyalty would completely disappear, replaced by intense hatred. However, most people seem to know this very well. Normally speaking, they wouldn't treat their slaves too harshly. In fact, there were many situations where slaves lived better than ordinary people. As a transmigrator, Andre had received higher education on Earth. He would treat anyone, even a beggar, with more respect. It was the same when it came to slaves. In addition to the powerful arcane technique he'd released last night, he'd completely conquered these simple grassland warriors. After watching the 11 cavalrymen chase the herd of deer into the distance, the rest of the people dismounted from their horses and quickly set up a rack on a large rock by the lake. The guards gathered firewood from the surrounding bushes and started to prepare the prey. A few minutes later, a deer and 2 chickens were placed on the rack to be roasted. There were a dozen eggs in the deer's stomach that they'd picked up from the bushes. It wasn't clear whether they belonged to wild chickens or ducks. Chloe stared at the deep blue surface of the lake and sighed. This place is so beautiful. If it's summer, it'll definitely become a summer resort. As long as we build a few houses by the lake, we can swim and hunt every day. Just thinking about it makes me excited. In a few months, I'll have someone build a wooden house by the lake. You can come whenever you want, but forget about swimming in the water. I don't think it's a good idea. After saying that, Andre tore off a chicken wing and threw it with all his might. The chicken wing drew a beautiful parabola as it flew into the distance. Just as it landed on the surface of the lake, a huge pike more than 3 meters long leaped out of the water and swallowed the chicken wing in one gulp. It then flopped back into the water and disappeared without a trace. Only the ripples on the surface of the water proved that the scene just now was not an illusion. After being stunned for a full minute, Chloe finally recovered from her shock and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Ah! Goddess of dawn above. What was that? Are they monsters? Andre smiled and waved his hand. All right, don't make a fuss. It's just a big carnivorous fish. It's just that it's been living for a long time, so it's bigger than the rest. Haven't you noticed that there are so many wild ducks and geese around here, but none of them dare to get close to the deep water? Obviously, they all know that there's danger inside, so they don't want to get close. In fact, in Oraire, where most of the area was covered in forests, there were countless large fish that were more than 2 meters long. It was said that there were even demon whales that were as big as islands in the ocean. They could easily capsize the largest ship and swallow it in one gulp. Only noble ladies who rarely went out would make a fuss about nothing. How scary. I won't swim here even if you beat me to death, Chloe said with lingering fear. Don't worry, I'll get this big fish out of the water in a few days. It's really too dangerous. Andre was very clear about the dangers of pikes. They were ferocious and agile. According to the size of the pikes, just now, even water birds would not be spared. If he wanted to breed large amounts of ducks, geese, and other poultry, he had to get rid of them as soon as possible. In addition, getting rid of this giant pike could also allow the other fish in the lake to rapidly reproduce. In the future, he might even try to breed some freshwater fish or something. Just as the two of them were talking and laughing, the slave soldiers who had gone out to hunt came back. They were indeed the best hunters on the prairie. Behind each of their horses hung a deer or a few rabbits or other prey. It seemed that they had a bountiful harvest. The guards, who had been hungry for a long time, hurriedly started to peel and clean the meat. After a short while, they had set up several racks. As for the first one that was roasted, it had already turned golden yellow and a rich aroma assailed their nostrils. Andre evenly smeared refined salt on the surface of the meat, then cut it into slices and handed them to Chloe and Beverly. At the same time, he took out the fully cooked eggs from the belly of the deer and threw them to the guards and slave soldiers. After the picnic, Andre sent the guards to send Chloe and Beverly back to the castle. Accompanied by several slave soldiers, he roughly inspected the surrounding environment. Then he went to the village to check the farming tools and farming methods used by the tenant farmers. It was not until the evening that he reluctantly returned to the castle. Along the way, he finally saw how backward the agricultural level of Oriar was. At the same time, he also discovered how miserable the farmers' lives were. There were a total of 4 villages in the valley. Most of them were short, damp, dark, and cold huts. The only thing that could be called a building was the windmill. The furnishings of the ordinary houses were even more simple. The furniture was only a table, a few stools, a few wooden boxes used to store bread, and the whole family only had one bed. All the family members slept on it without even a quilt. Fortunately, the climate in the south was not too cold. Otherwise, they would definitely freeze to death in winter. Apart from that, the peasants didn't have much to eat. Basically, it was either porridge or black bread. There were only a few types of vegetables, and they could only eat cheese and salted meat during festivals. As for the poultry, livestock, and eggs, they didn't even dare to touch them because these were the property of the feudal lord, and they were only responsible for raising them. As for the farming methods, Andre had always thought that the backward agriculture of Lonely Mountain Town was because it was far away from civilized society. Today, he realized that the whole continent was almost the same. The basic farming tools were only hoes, pitchforks, and sickles. They relied completely on their hands to farm and did not even have the most basic plow. Chapter 139. According to the farmers, there were some heavy plows in the manors of the nobles, but they were complicated and expensive to make. Moreover, they were too heavy and required a lot of animal power. Therefore, most of the manor owners were unwilling to invest too much in them, and the farmers themselves could not afford to use them. After a round of inspection, Andre finally understood why the price of food was so high and why the farmers could only afford to eat and wear. Backward. It was really too backward. He could not believe that the people of Oriar still did not know the importance of fertilization. Basically, after sowing, they just sat at home and watched the sky while eating. They did not do any weeding or insect control. It would be strange if they could get a good harvest. The human civilization of this world had a history of more than 10,000 years. For such a long time, the most important thing, agriculture, had not developed at all. It was completely in place. As everyone knew, the production of food determined the population, and the population determined the speed of social development. Since the production of food did not increase, the population naturally could not increase. In addition, monsters and beasts often attacked the human world, so labor was always in a state of relative shortage. This ensured that the primitive feudal system in this land would not decline. Andre was not a sociologist, so he had no interest in promoting the development of the whole world. He only wanted his territory to become rich as soon as possible. Therefore, when he returned to the castle, he immediately summoned the scholars, blacksmiths, and carpenters that he bought from the slave market. Without any nonsense, he directly wrote down his knowledge of agriculture on parchment. At the same time, he also drew 2 sketches of plows. The knowledge of agriculture was given to the scholars, and the sketches were given to the blacksmiths and carpenters. Finish reading the things on the paper, and tell me if you can do it. Because the drawings were relatively simple, the carpenters quickly finished reading and immediately said without hesitation, "Master, as long as there is enough wood, I promise that I can make at least 3 farming tools a day. However many farming tools you can make, we can make as many shovels." One of the blacksmiths also patted his chest and made a promise. In fact, the structure of the hand plow was very simple. It was only assembled with a few pieces of wood. There was no technical difficulty at all. Basically, one could learn it by just looking at it. However, such a simple gadget was a treasure that could increase grain production by leaps and bounds. It could allow farmers to cultivate more land at once. Normally, a day's work with a hoe could be completed in 1 or 2 hours with a plow. Hearing the blacksmith and carpenter's reply, Andre nodded his head lightly. "Very good. Then you can start preparing. It's winter now, so recruit more tenants to cut down trees. Try to make more than 500 of them in a month or 2. I'll need them during the spring plowing. Remember, this matter is very important. You can't be careless. Go and prepare now. I hope to see all the farmers using this thing in a month or 2. Please rest assured that we will do our best to complete this task." The The carpenter took the lead and bowed. The two blacksmiths hurriedly followed suit and left the room. They couldn't wait to show off their skills in front of their new master so that they could obtain better living conditions in the future. After the three of them left, only the scholar in his 50s was left in the room. He was still focused on reading the contents of the parchment. According to the description of the slave merchant, his name was Abner. He was originally the private advisor of a faraway count of the kingdom of Ika. He was proficient in business, management, agriculture, animal husbandry, and many other fields of knowledge. He could almost be considered an all-round talent. Normally, he would live a life that others would envy. Unfortunately, although he was outstanding, his wife was a complete idiot. Not only did she greedily ask for bribes behind his back, but she was also bold enough to reach her hand into the count's taxes. For a powerful count, perhaps he could tolerate his subordinates collecting wealth, but he would never tolerate anyone offending his authority. And taxes represented the privilege of nobles. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to execute his greedy wife. At the same time, he demoted his most trusted advisor to a slave and sold him to a merchant. Chloe had taken a fancy to Abner's talents, which was why she didn't hesitate to spend a large sum of money to buy him. With such an all-round talent, the entire manor would soon be in good order. 10 minutes later, Andre felt that Abner should have finished reading. So he asked, "Tell me, do you think the tenants will accept this new farming method?" Abner stroked the beard on his chin and nodded slightly. "It shouldn't be a big problem. Even if they don't want to, what can they do? You are the lord of this land and have supreme authority. The only thing they can do is to obey. But are you sure that the method written on the parchment can really increase the grain yield?" Although he was already a slave, one could still hear the disdain and contempt for the peasants from his tone. It fully reflected the strict hierarchy of Orier and the value of knowledge. In the eyes of most people, scholars, nobles, and powerful professionals were 100 times more noble than illiterate peasants, even if they were reduced to slaves and beggars. The tolerance of the law was definitely double. For example, the crime of Abner's wife. If she had been a peasant, her entire family would have been executed in the cruelest way possible. However, she was only reduced to a slave, which showed how big the difference was. Of course, when the spring plowing season comes, you will be responsible for making all the peasants follow the instructions. I guarantee that the grain yield will increase by at least 3 times. In short, plan the land as soon as possible. Which areas will be farmland and which will be pasture? Divide them and cut them off with fences. In addition, I will be buying a large number of slaves in the near future. So you should plan the village and land as soon as possible to ensure that there won't be any trouble when the time comes. With that, Andre gently rubbed his forehead. Although he didn't like the old man's attitude and views, it was a universal value on the continent. Almost all the ruling class thought so, and even the peasants themselves didn't have any objections. The only thing he could do was to make the peasants in his territory live a little better. I heard that you seem to be preparing for something big. It's best to start building some of the foundations now. I plan to hire people tomorrow to dig a few irrigation canals and build some wooden houses. There's still 1 to 2 months before the spring plowing season, so there should be plenty of time. With that, Abner placed the parchment in his hand on a candle and burned it to ashes. Chapter 140. As an outstanding internal consultant, Abner could tell at a glance the importance of the knowledge recorded on the parchment. If the autumn harvest could really triple the harvest, it would undoubtedly be a priceless treasure. That was why he quickly destroyed it after memorizing it in order to keep his secret. After all, Tue's Valley was a relatively isolated environment. As long as the castle gates were shut, no one would be able to pry into the secrets inside. As long as they were careful, they could completely keep this method a secret forever. Don't think that this was the so-called awareness of a farmer. In fact, many noble families in Linton City placed great importance on keeping secrets. Some had the technology to breed heavy war horses, some controlled the shipbuilding industry, and some knew how to quickly breed livestock. Without exception, all of them hid their secrets and did not let anyone know. They wanted to keep their families at the forefront of this industry, so Abner's actions could not be more normal. Seeing the parchment turn into a pile of ash, Andre stood up and patted the old man's shoulder. Then I'll leave everything to you. I'm going back to Linton City tomorrow. On one hand, I'm going to scout for information. On the other hand, I'm going to buy slaves and livestock. No problem. Just leave a letter of appointment before you leave. Without it, I won't be able to command those warriors. It was obvious that Abner was used to managing the businesses of nobles. He was not flustered at all. Perhaps to him, managing the Valley Manor did not take much effort at all. Don't worry, I'll make sure everything is ready before I leave tomorrow. You just need to execute the plan one by one. Having said that, Andre walked out of the house without looking back, heading straight for Elsa's room. Just like those men and women who had just had intimate relations, he could not wait to meet his lover after he was done with his business. He also wanted to do some exercise that was good for his body and mind. After spending another passionate night in the castle, Andre sat in a carriage with Chloe and her guards the next morning on the road back to Lynn City. The others remained in the castle for the time being. He knew very well that the city must be very chaotic right now. On one hand, it had been a long time since the barbarians attacked the noble's property so blatantly. On the other hand, it was because of the sudden appearance of the demon-worshipping organization Poisonous Tailhook and the rampant behavior of the pirates a while ago. Many things had become complicated. Under such circumstances, the city had become very unsafe. He didn't want his lover, Elsa, and the little lowly, Beverly, to be in danger, so he let them stay in the valley and enjoy a simple life in the countryside. Of course, another reason was that there were more rooms in the castle, and it was very convenient for the two of them to sneak out in the middle of the night to get intimate. This kind of sneaky behavior was particularly exciting, and it made people unable to stop even if they wanted to. Even Elsa, who had always been shy, was deeply immersed in it. If she returned to the small house in the slums, it was very likely that her daughter would find out, so she would rather maintain the status quo. Sitting in the carriage, Andre recalled the seductive moans of the young widow last night while looking at the scenery outside the window. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he noticed that there were suddenly more soldiers patrolling along the road. In particular, the knights, who were usually not easily dispatched, had also appeared on the roads around the city. It made people feel that something big was about to happen. The knights were the second most powerful force in Linton City after the Sorcerers Association. Only melee professions of rank 6 and above were qualified to join, and most of them were feudal knights. There was also a small group of warriors, almost all of them wearing heavy armor. They were humanoid bulldozers, and although there were only about 100 of them, a single charge was enough to crush thousands of soldiers. They were the cornerstone of the entire city, the defenders of the noble order. Only a large city like Linton City with developed trade could afford to support them. If it were the Canteru Kingdom, a baron could at most support 5 feudal knights, and there were less than 200 feudal knights directly under the jurisdiction of the royal family. Normally speaking, these knights wouldn't even appear on the streets. They would only train their killing skills in the camp every day. Their appearance usually meant war and bloodshed. Looking at the situation, the leader of the guards, Anthony, rode his horse to the window and whispered, "Looking at the current situation, I'm afraid the current problems in the city are not just the devil worshippers, pirates, and spies. There are probably other more important issues. Otherwise, the knights would definitely not be deployed." "Oh, what do you think would make the council so nervous that even powerful feudal knights will be mobilized?" Andre asked softly with narrowed eyes. As an outsider, his knowledge of Linton City and the Green Sea Alliance wasn't much better than most commoners. Even though he was now a noble, he didn't know about the hidden conflicts of interests and exchanges. He also didn't know who the city's enemies were. Is there even a need to ask? It must be Bacaro City's little tricks again, trying to steal the trade share. Don't worry, they've been challenging Linton City's rule of the sea every once in a while, but they've never succeeded. Chloe pursed her lips nonchalantly, looking like she didn't care about the matter at all. Although she was a little naive by nature, she had been educated as an elite noble for a long time. She was also influenced by what she heard and saw, so she had a good understanding of the grudges between the various cities of the Green Sea Alliance. She didn't even need to think before she made the wrong guess. Bacaro. Andre furrowed his brows and muttered softly. He immediately looked at the leader of the guards outside the window, hoping that he could give him an explanation. Anthony stroked the stubble on his chin and sighed. This matter can be traced back to more than 100 years ago. Bacaro City hadn't joined the Green Sea Alliance back then, often competing with Linton City on the sea. Be it trade or military, there would be some friction every few days. As time passed, a deep hatred was formed. Even after they joined the alliance, the two sides would often erupt in conflict, and a war would break out every few years. But fortunately, Linton City's strength is a little better, so they haven't lost yet. You mean to say that the war with Bacaro City, the poisonous tailhook, and the pirates all happened at the same time? The corner of Andre's mouth rose slightly, a trace of playfulness on his face. Chapter 141. Only a fool would believe that these were coincidences. As for Andre himself, he smelled a thick scent of conspiracy from it. He reckoned that the four dukes in the city were already at their wits' end. They had no choice but to reveal their trump card, the knights, in an attempt to intimidate the restless monsters living in the border forest so that the situation would not develop into a worse situation. Obviously, there was someone or an organization behind all of this. In order to consign Linton City to eternal damnation, the other party had woven a huge net in advance and definitely had a backup plan. To be honest, he did not expect that he would encounter such a good show after just a few days in Linton City and even get involved in it. Although it was a little dangerous, it was also an opportunity to greatly improve his strength. Anthony keenly noticed the flash of light in the youth's eyes and immediately lowered his voice to reply. I also think that what happened recently is a little unusual. Countess Anastasia once said that since the pirates of the Sardinia Islands started the war, there has been a force secretly opposing Linton City, but the dukes have never found out who it is. What? Anne actually said such a thing? Why didn't I know? Chloe widened her eyes in shock. My dear lady, Lady Anastasia has been trying to persuade Count Luke not to let you go out to sea at this dangerous time, but I don't know what happened to the Count. He stubbornly believes that the political situation in Napery is about to become unstable, which is why the pirates attacked later. They were so accurate that it was as if they had obtained the information in advance. Before the investigation is clear, the Countess doesn't want you to know about these things. With that, Anthony rode his horse and bowed slightly, running to the front of the team. Chloe was stunned on the chair. It took her a full minute to come back to her senses. She hurriedly asked, "Oh my God, does he mean that someone wants to kidnap me?" Andre nodded slightly. That's right. According to my guess, you and your family are probably involved in a huge conspiracy, and it's a crucial step. Wait and see. When we return to the city this time, there might be many people pursuing you. Most of them are idiots being used, but one of them must be a chess piece sent by the mastermind behind the scenes. Huh. I've seen the so-called young elites of Linton City a long time ago. They're all a bunch of fellows living under the protection of their parents. They're not worth paying attention to at all. Chloe raised her chin proudly, her eyes filled with disdain and contempt for the young nobles. Of course, this had something to do with the exaggerated stories and books she often heard. After all, compared to those legendary heroes, even the elite nobles paled in comparison. Coupled with the so-called artistic processing, they were as perfect as sculptures without a single blemish. How could ordinary people compare to them? Andre smiled non-committally at the girl's picky eyes. Hee, don't worry. You'll soon find someone who meets your requirements. I feel that since the other party was able to investigate your family so thoroughly, they must also know your character. So this time, we can look forward to it. Since the mastermind behind the scenes dared to provoke him, he had to be prepared to pay the price. After all, Linton City was only a temporary place for him to settle down. He could go all out and do whatever he wanted. If he won, he would naturally reap countless benefits. If he lost, he could just escape with his people. Just like the saying goes, those who have nothing to lose are not afraid of those who wear shoes. He didn't have many interests or concerns in Linton City, and naturally had nothing to worry about. If he really couldn't do it, he could just wreak havoc and make sure the other party's scheme didn't succeed. Chloe winked playfully, reaching out her lace-gloved hand and pressing it against her chest, pretending to be heartbroken. "Oh, my hero, are you planning to abandon me?" Uffed. Eunice, who was sitting beside the coachman, couldn't help but cover her mouth and snicker when she heard the noble girl speak like an actress. The loyal coachman glared at her angrily, as if threatening to kick her out of the carriage if she continued to laugh. Andre felt that this was quite interesting. He took the girl's hand and kissed her white glove. "Of course not, beautiful lady. This is to expose the enemy's scheme. Don't you think that this can numb the enemy's nerves and steal some information? But what if I'm really charmed by him?" Chloe was obviously addicted to acting and continued to press on. The stage plays on the Oleo continent were somewhat similar to the combination of opera and drama on Earth. Although Andre had never seen one before, for the girl's performance, he could more or less understand that this was a form of performance that was extremely exaggerated in terms of language and actions. Goosebumps instantly appeared all over his body. He felt that he had to end this topic as soon as possible, or he wouldn't know when he would spit it out. He immediately let go of her hand and comforted her with a smile. "Don't mess around. I promise the guy won't even have a chance to get close to you. When we return to the city, I'll block anyone who comes to harass you." Chloe's eyes lit up. She leaned forward slightly and asked excitedly, "So I can tell others that you are my lover?" Andre smiled and nodded. "Yes, as long as you don't mind." "Of course I don't mind. I'm more than happy to." After saying that, Chloe didn't care if there were people around watching them. She immediately pounced on him and gave him a passionate kiss. Perhaps riding a bumpy carriage for more than 3 hours was a painful thing for most people, but if you were to hold a passionate and beautiful girl in your arms, it would be a different feeling. As the saying goes, humans' perception of time is relative. When you feel happy or wholeheartedly devoted, time will pass unknowingly. When you dare to feel pain, despair, and idleness, every second will be as long as an hour. Although Chloe looked a bit like a love-struck fool, it was undeniable that she was indeed very beautiful. She was full of the enthusiasm and vitality of a young girl in her adolescence. In addition, she took the initiative to deliver herself to his door. Perhaps a normal man would find it hard to refuse. However, even the most nostalgic journey would come to an end. As they approached the city gate, Andre helped the girl in his arms, whose eyes were blurred and whose neck and cheeks were faintly red, to the seat opposite him. He smiled and kissed the other party's palm that was wearing a white lace glove. Chapter 142. Although it was common for nobles to be intimate in a carriage, they still had to be mindful of the consequences. After all, in the eyes of many, there was a big difference between a lady and a lady. He was well aware of the infatuation this noble girl had for him, and at the same time, he enjoyed this kind of innocent and naive love. If the Mariel family was really being spied on as he expected, he wouldn't mind using a marriage alliance to wrestle with a mastermind. In any case, most of the nobles in Oraire were very liberal and didn't fully adhere to monogamy. Men with power could marry multiple wives, and women with power could have a large group of male companions. In this world, lust and promiscuity weren't seen as a stain on morality, but were instead envied by everyone. The premise was that one had enough power or personal strength. As Andre's understanding of the continent deepened, he realized that it was completely different from the way things were on Earth. Although power and money could play a good role to a certain extent, it was still power that decided one's fate. Every noble family did their best to nurture their children into warriors, mages, priests, knights, and other professions with superhuman strength. At the very least, they would learn management and all kinds of professional knowledge. In short, there were very few arrogant idiots, because that was the only way to ensure the prosperity and continuity of the family. Otherwise, they would quickly decline after 2 generations and would have no choice but to quietly withdraw from the upper class. It must be known that even an underage girl like Crowley was already a qualified businesswoman and a very professional consultant. Many of the development plans in Tua's Valley were completed under her suggestions and inspiration. Slowly passing through the city gates, the group headed straight for the nobles' district. After entering the city, the first thing Andre wanted to do was to send Chloe safely to her aunt's hands, while at the same time, he wanted to gather some information. Although it had only been 2 days since he left, Linton City seemed to have changed. On the surface, there didn't seem to be anything different, but the expressions on the patrolling soldiers' faces showed that they were very nervous. Every squad was equipped with a considerable number of crossbows and were obviously in a state of readiness for battle. As soon as the order was given, they would immediately gather and enter battle. Sigh, it seems like the situation is not optimistic. The Dukes have already decided to use war to solve the problem. Anthony sighed softly as he muttered to himself. Hearing this, Andre's eyes suddenly turned dark. He remembered that he was a member of the Sorcerers' Association. If a war broke out, he would be summoned at any time. The other sorcerers would be no exception. Perhaps the mastermind's goal was to lure the tiger away from the mountain and wait for the mage tower to weaken before carrying out his plan. The tower in the center of the city was not just for decoration. It was an alchemy masterpiece that had cost tens or even millions of gold coins. Normally, it could absorb energy from the air and store it. When necessary, it could not only monitor the city and the surrounding sea, but it was also equivalent to a strategic weapon that could shoot lightning, fireballs, poisonous clouds, summon monsters, and so on. Of course, there had to be enough mages to operate it, but if there were too few mages, the power would drop by several levels. From a certain point of view, the mage tower was the city's last resort of defense. Its main purpose was to deter the enemy. It was just like the nuclear weapons on Earth. Ever since they were invented, they had only been used once or twice in actual combat. However, after a few decades, people would still turn pale at the mention of it. One plan after another. They really don't give anyone a chance to fight back. I'm getting more and more curious. Who is the mastermind behind all this? The corner of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. A barely noticeable smile flashed across his face. Perhaps it was because he had been suppressed in a poor and backward town for many years. But now, not only did he not have a trace of fear towards this unknown enemy, he even had a feeling of eagerness to fight. As the saying goes, there's endless joy in fighting with the heavens, endless joy in fighting with the earth, and endless joy in fighting with people. Fighting had always been a basic way of survival in nature. Even though civilization had removed the fangs of humans and smoothed out their bodies, there was still a ferocious beast lurking in the depths of everyone's heart. They had an almost instinctive desire for primitive slaughter and plunder. Although the law had brought order, it had not truly erased the nature of fighting. At the same time, in the basement of a remote house in Lincoln City, a spy who had escaped from Tua's Valley was kneeling on the ground, trembling as he reported, "Master, the barbarians have failed. They couldn't take down the castle before the reinforcements arrived. That foreign mage called Andre is very powerful. He saw through our trap at a glance and played the Shift's tribe like a fiddle. Even a powerful barbarian warrior like Ogre Wong was easily killed. Oh, I remember that the Shift's tribe's guardian totem is a displacement beast, right? How did that mage defeat it?" The man sitting on the chair, his entire face hidden under the hood, asked in a low voice. Seeing that the man wasn't angry, the spy let out a sigh of relief and carefully replied, "It was too far away. I couldn't see clearly, but I'm certain that the mage created a powerful explosion. From the power of it, it's likely to be a spell of at least level 4. Master, I think it's necessary to use Blood Dagger to get rid of this person. Otherwise, he'll definitely ruin our plans to annex House Marius. An underage mage of the 7th rank? Interesting. That means he's a prodigy through and through. He might even have a true great mage backing him." The man stroked the short beard on his chin as he spoke. "You mean, a great mage wants to reach into the Green Sea Alliance?" The spy's eyes widened in shock, his face full of disbelief. The man took a deep breath and gently shook his head. "No, from the looks of it, it should be the young mage's own actions. Perhaps he's training, or perhaps he wants to obtain some resources and power. How about this? Let the female scorpion probe him first and see his attitude. If possible, try to rope him in. That old man Boris is hard enough to deal with. I don't want to provoke another great mage at such a crucial time. You should know that making multiple powerful enemies at once isn't a smart thing to do. I don't want to test my limits yet, so be careful. This is the most crucial time of our plan. We can't allow any accidents. Chapter 143. Understood. I'll send a mission to the female scorpion right away. With that, the spy stood up and bowed deeply, quickly disappearing into the shadows. Not long after he left, the man picked up the cup and took a sip of the blood-red wine. Then he suddenly laughed inexplicably. Ha ha ha. Cole, you're finally back. How is it? Have the pirates of the Sardinia Islands agreed to my conditions? As soon as his voice fell, a handsome man dressed in fancy clothes slowly walked out of the darkness. He then took off his hat in a very exaggerated manner. Of course, my dear master. When those pirates heard that they could wipe out the Lincoln City Navy and plunder the wealth of the city, they were all extremely excited and agreed to our conditions without even thinking about it. Very good. It seems that our plan should be able to enter the second stage. As he spoke, the man took out an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table. The young man, called Cole, took 2 steps forward excitedly and quickly opened the envelope. He carefully read the contents of the parchment, and after a while, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. Stop approaching the Mariel family's first daughter. Why? I was going to have a good taste of this slightly green grape. There's a slight change in the plan. That girl called Chloe is now in close contact with a mage called Andre. If our spies are not mistaken, they should already be in a state of passionate love. This person is a little troublesome, and he has ruined several kidnappings, so I'm going to test his attitude first. The man obviously attached great importance to this matter, so he patiently explained. In his eyes, there was no such thing as loyalty in this world. As long as he was willing to pay a price, he could definitely rope in anyone. Thus, he did not want to continue provoking Andre to prevent a situation where they would fight to the death. Cole was so angry that his whole body trembled. He stared with 2 blood-red eyes and roared loudly. Damn it! That girl is mine. I've even prepared how to turn her into a perfect toy. Shut up. Have you forgotten your identity? Or do you think you can already challenge my authority? Behave yourself for a period of time. If I find out that you dare to ruin the descending plan, then just wait to be sacrificed alive. With that, the man snorted coldly, stood up, turned around, and disappeared into the dark cellar. Clenching his fists tightly, Cole's whole body was trembling. He did not know whether it was because of fear or anger. After a full 5 minutes, he gradually calmed down and muttered to himself with a sneer, No one can take away my toy. You can't. That mage called Andre can't either. Chloe, my little baby, don't worry. You'll soon experience the feeling of pain and pleasure. After saying that, he stretched out a finger and fiddled with the harp in his arms, and a twisted smile appeared on his face. The mansion of Countess Anastasia was located in the highest area of Lincoln City. It was a 3-story stone building that covered an area of about 2,500 square meters. It was surrounded by gardens, fountains, and grasslands. Although it was not the best in the city, it was still very expensive. Just the monthly maintenance fee alone was about 200 to 300 gold coins. At this moment, Andre was sitting in a room with a window on the 2nd floor, leisurely eating snacks on a plate and drinking a strange sweet drink that was soaked in fresh flower petals. In Orire, this drink was equivalent to tea on earth. He had been sitting here for a full 5 minutes because Chloe had a conflict with the Countess as soon as she came back. The two were arguing fiercely in the next room. As an outsider, it was not convenient for him to participate, so he was brought here by the butler to rest for a while and wait for the aunt and niece to calm down. But just when Andre thought that this argument would take at least an hour or 2 to end, the door was suddenly pushed open. Countess Anastasia took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the anger in her heart, and gave a standard salute. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. Chloe has been very stubborn since she was young. She rarely listens to anyone's advice. Once she has made up her mind, even her father can't do anything about it. I believe that with your wisdom, you should be able to see that Lincoln City is now covered in dark clouds. The best way is to send her to a safe place. Otherwise, if something happens, the Mariel family will be without a descendant. Andre put down his cup and stood up to return the salute. He then nodded slightly. I can understand your anxiety, but have you considered that leaving Lincoln City can guarantee her safety? Forgive me for being blunt, but the mastermind behind the scenes has already set his eyes on the Mariel family and Chloe. No matter where she hides, danger and trouble will follow. Hearing this, Countess Anastasia's expression instantly turned ugly. She frowned and cursed in a low voice. Damn it! If I find out who's behind all this, I'll make them beg for death. I'm afraid that's very difficult. Judging from the power that the mastermind has mobilized, they must have a very powerful background and strength. Whether it's the pirates of the Sardinia Islands or the barbarians in the depths of the forest, they're not people that ordinary people can mobilize. Coupled with Bakharov City's abnormal behavior, I can guarantee that they've already infiltrated every corner of the Green Sea Alliance. This conspiracy isn't just against one or two families, but all the cities in the Alliance. Andre explained the grim situation with a smile. From the persistence and madness displayed by the enemy, it was obvious that they wouldn't stop until they caught the girl. He felt more and more that the 2,000 barbarian warriors were coming for him. But that won't do. That won't do either. What should I do? Heavens, I feel like I'm going crazy. Whoa. Countess Anastasia screamed at the top of her lungs a few times before covering her face and crying. Perhaps it was because she'd been under too much pressure recently, or perhaps she was worried about the future of her family. In short, her nerves were stretched to the extreme, and she might go crazy if this continued. As the only man in the room, Andre took out his handkerchief and gently wiped the tears from the lady's face. He comforted her. Relax, Countess. The situation hasn't reached the worst yet. Think about it. Why has the enemy been using power in the shadows instead of directly controlling Lincoln City? Because their power is still weak in the city, or at least they haven't infiltrated the army enough. This gives us a chance to counterattack. Chapter 144. As the only man and person in the room, Andre took out his handkerchief and wiped the tears off the lady's face. Relax, Countess. The situation isn't as bad as it could be. Think about it. Why is the enemy using their power in the dark instead of directly controlling the entire city? Because their power is still weak in the city, or at least they haven't infiltrated the army yet. This gives us a chance to fight back. Thank you. You're such a considerate gentleman. No wonder Chloe is so infatuated with you. If I were 10 years younger, I would also consider a passionate relationship. Anastasia wiped the tears off her face and teased in a half-joking tone. It's my honor to be favored by a beautiful lady like you, Andre replied with a smile. In fact, it was normal for nobles to joke around like this. At the same time, it was also a form of affirmation and praise, not really any special thoughts. He had read many books about how to deal with such situations, so he handled it very well. After regaining her composure, Anastasia took off her black lace gloves and sighed slightly. Sigh? According to what you said, the mastermind has already set his eyes on the inheritance of the Mariel family. Then how can I protect Chloe and fight back? Andre shrugged and explained, it's very simple. Money and power. I'm sure you know that glittering gold coins represent everything in Lincoln City. As long as you have enough money, nobles can raise a large number of private armies and fleets in order to seek higher social status and power. Think about it. If you have a private army about the same number as the city guards, what would the four dukes do? They would undoubtedly invite you to the city hall and announce the birth of the 5 dukes in Lincoln City. Although he had only been in this seaside city for a short time, he had a general understanding of the city's political structure. To put it bluntly, money was the most important thing. The 4 dukes controlled the most trade routes, so they had the ability to raise the most private armies. The other nobles were ranked according to their strength. As for the city guards and knights, they belonged to the entire city. No noble had the right to mobilize them. If they wanted to mobilize them on a large scale, they had to be approved by the city council. Of course, normally speaking, the position of the duke was not fixed. In the first 100 years or so, the position of the duke was constantly changing. However, after a long period of development and monopolization of trade, for families gradually controlled nearly a third of the entire city and even more of the resources. Their political positions gradually became stable and finally formed the situation today. To a certain extent, the political structure of Linton City was a stable triangle formed by the duke, other nobles, and merchants. There were also a number of adventurers, the Mage Association, and the Church of Light in between. Of course, I know the importance of increasing the number of private soldiers, but with my current income, it's already very difficult for me to support more than 100 guards. I can't support more. Anastasia shrugged helplessly. In this world full of danger, no matter if it was a merchant or a noble, they would do their best to hire servants to protect their wealth and safety. The slightly stronger commoners were cheap, around 2 or 3 silver coins a day. However, those with true professions were several times more expensive. Normally, a rank 1 warrior would cost 6 silver coins a day, which was equivalent to half a gold coin. That would be 15 gold coins a month. That would be around 200 gold coins a year. 100 people would be 20,000 gold coins. This didn't include the cost of weapons, armor, food, and lodging. One had to know that during the period of employment, the employer had to take care of the mercenaries' basic necessities. What a terrifying number. It was said that elites were built with money. This saying was not wrong at all. Moreover, every time a profession's rank increased, the price would double. The price of a mage consultant was even more ridiculous. Even if they didn't do anything, they would still have to pay at least 50,000 gold coins a year. If it weren't for the fact that Lincoln City had a developed maritime trade, the nobles wouldn't have been able to afford such a large private army. The fact that Countess Anastasia could afford more than 100 guards was a testament to House Mariel's wealth. Looking at the faint sorrow of this beautiful, mature woman in front of him, Andre immediately understood that it was time to show his trump card. He secretly scanned the surroundings. After making sure that no one was eavesdropping, he leaned forward slightly and said in a low voice, "I have a way to make a lot of money. I don't know if you're interested." "How big is it?" Lady Anastasia's eyes lit up. "Very big. As long as it's done properly, it won't be a problem to buy the entire Lincoln City." Andre took out a folded parchment from his pocket and waved it in front of her. "I know a way to extract salt from seawater. It doesn't require a lot of manpower or capital, but the effect is hundreds of times better than boiling salt. Think about it. How much profit can you make from this business?" According to his original plan, he'd planned to do it himself after gaining a certain amount of power. However, it seemed that it wouldn't work now. If he couldn't stabilize the situation, the entire Lincoln City would fall into the hands of the enemy. Thus, he had to find a partner in advance. The Mariel family, which was currently in crisis, was a good choice. On top of that, he had a close relationship with Chloe. He believed that she would keep this a secret. Oh my gods, did I hear wrongly? Anastasia's breathing suddenly quickened. A faint blush appeared on her face and neck, and her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. As a noble of the Green Sea Alliance, she knew all too well how profitable the salt trade was. However, there were too few salt lakes and rock mines in the south. They were basically in the hands of a few powerful families, and no one else could interfere. If the Mariel family mastered the new salt production technology, it wouldn't take long for them to become one of the leading nobles in the alliance with their hundreds of years of business. Andre smiled confidently and placed the parchment on the table. "Of course you didn't hear wrongly. The method I'm talking about is recorded on this parchment. It even includes a method to refine coarse salt into refined salt without any impurities. I'm a mage, and I don't like to waste my time on business. I'm happy to find a partner. Madam, it's your turn to make a bid." Chapter 145. Andre picked up his cup and took a sip of the slightly sweet drink. silently waiting for the other party's reply. As the saying went, there was no such thing as a father and son in business. Although he and Chloe were currently in a very special relationship, he still had to take the benefits. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the money to continue studying and researching advanced magical knowledge to improve his strength. Staring at the shabby parchment on the table, Lady Anastasia's expression kept changing, fully reflecting the struggle in her heart. She knew that such an important thing would require a lot of bargaining chips. Otherwise, it would be impossible to get it. However, the most important bargaining chip in her hand was her niece. Before she found out the specific identity of the young man in front of her, she wasn't sure if this was the right thing to do. One had to know that noble marriages weren't a trivial matter, especially for the only female heir like Chloe. One wrong move, and the whole family would be swallowed up. Similar situations had happened many times in the Green Sea Alliance. Although the successor was also a descendant of the family, for most nobles, they would try to avoid it as much as possible. Although there was no lack of strong women like queens, female knights, and female mages on the Oleo continent, it was still a patriarchal society. In addition, Andre was also a mage. If both sides were to marry, the man would inevitably become the stronger party. In a few years, he would be able to control the entire family's resources. By then, it would be too easy for him to swallow up the family. After more than 10 minutes of intense struggle, Anastasia finally made up her mind. In any case, being swallowed up by marriage was much better than being swallowed up by the enemy behind the scenes. After thinking it through, she rubbed the space between her eyebrows in exhaustion. She directly took off the ring with the family crest on her finger and gently placed it on the table. Here, this is a ring that only the direct members of the Mariel family have. I now give it to you and solemnly invite you to marry. Now answer me. Are you willing to become Chloe's husband and protect her forever? Marriage? Andre showed a very surprised expression. He originally thought that it would be fine if he could get a higher share of the profits, but he didn't expect the other party to offer such generous terms. Marriage between nobles was no joke. Once it was decided, there was no room for regret. Otherwise, it would be a life and death feud. Moreover, Chloe was the only legal successor of the entire family. Marrying her was equivalent to obtaining all the wealth of the Mariel family in the future. This was the so-called marrying a beautiful, rich, and beautiful woman, and from then on walking to the pinnacle of life. Lady Anasta nodded slightly. That's right. Marriage. That's the only way I can think of. The technology in your hands is too important. Only after you become Chloe's husband can you guarantee that the technology won't leak out. Could it be that you have other engagements? Many big families had the habit of getting engaged in advance. On one hand, it was to deepen the relationship, and on the other hand, it was to prevent outsiders from spying on them. She felt that such an outstanding young man like Andre was likely to have an engagement. No, I don't. Although I have a couple of close lovers, I don't have an engagement. But are you sure you don't need to ask Chloe and her father's opinion? Andre yearned for unfettered freedom, so he rejected marriage from the bottom of his heart. The thought of living with a woman for the rest of his life made his scalp tingle, so he didn't hesitate to use the delaying strategy. He always had a deep fear of having a close connection with this world. It was an indescribable feeling, as if once he had a close connection with this world, some very precious things would disappear. Hearing that there was no engagement, Lady Anasta immediately let out a sigh of relief. She said in a half-joking tone, No wonder Chloe is so infatuated with you. It turns out that you've already done it with your lovers. But it doesn't matter. Most male nobles have 3 to 5 lovers. It's no big deal. I don't think you need to ask Chloe. She'll jump for joy when she hears the news. As for my brother, there's no need to inform him for the time being. He's been a little strange recently. Anyway, as Chloe's aunt, I have the right to choose a fiancé for her. Seeing that he couldn't refuse, Andre could only suppress the uneasiness in his heart and nodded with a forced smile. Well, then we'll do as you say. But don't rush to announce this matter, because it's likely to cause a more intense reaction from the enemy. For now, please take a look at the method of drying salt. He was very clear that if one side proposed a marriage and he refused, it would be tantamount to looking down on the other side, which would easily cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. So he could only bite the bullet and agree first. Although Chloe's personality was a bit of a natural and infatuated, she was kind-hearted and not scheming. As a partner, she was not bad. At least, she was much better than most of the scheming and vain noble ladies. Huh, I really can't see that you're still uneasy and shy. Don't worry, Chloe has long regarded you as her only lover. For so many years, I've never seen her care for anyone as much as she cares for you. Well, now let me see the method of making salt you described. With that, Lady Anastasia couldn't wait to open the parchment and read the contents carefully. In fact, the method of drying salt with seawater was very simple. First, dig a large number of salt pans in the coastal area. A part of them would be used as an evaporation pond, and the rest would be used as a crystallization pond. The process of making salt was not difficult. First, the seawater would be introduced into the evaporation pond, and the water would be evaporated to a certain extent under the sun. It would be poured into another crystallization pond and continued to be dried under the sun. It wouldn't take long for the seawater to become a saturated solution of table salt, and then the table salt would gradually precipitate out after being dried under the sun. At this time, the crystals obtained would be the common coarse salt. For the people of Orire, coarse salt was a relatively expensive, high-quality table salt. Most ordinary people ate the salt mines dug out from the ground. Because the extraction technology was not up to standard, there were a lot of impurities in it, and it was bitter and astringent. Therefore, coarse salt was considered a rare good salt. The most important thing about drying salt with seawater was that there was enough light, and the rain couldn't be too frequent. Otherwise, every time the salt was about to be dried, the heavy rain would dilute the salt, and it would be a waste of effort. However, the temperature near Lincoln City was more than 10 degrees in winter, and there was plenty of light. As long as it wasn't the rainy season in May or June, and the rain wasn't very frequent, it was definitely a good place to dry salt. Chapter 146. According to the current high price of table salt, as long as he found a hidden place and transferred a group of loyal slaves, he would be able to start earning a steady stream of gold coins in about a month or two, which was guaranteed to be faster than robbing. Of course, Andre also had other ways to earn a lot of gold coins, such as firing porcelain, making glass mirrors, sugarcane planting and sugar production techniques, the design of large ocean-going sailing ships, and so on. Almost any one of them was enough to make him a fortune that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. But he didn't intend to take them out too early. Gold coins were tempting, but if he didn't have the strength to match it, it would be like a child walking on a busy street with a gold brick. Sooner or later, he would be spied on and even robbed by force. Don't think that senior professions were a group of experts who treated money like dirt. On the contrary, their desire for wealth was stronger than ordinary people, especially the archmages. When researching magic and conducting experiments, they spent money like running water. Sometimes, a single experiment would cost tens of thousands of gold coins. How could they do it without money? Senior warriors also needed a lot of money. Enchanted weapons, enchanted helmets, enchanted armors, enchanted boots, enchanted gloves, enchanted shields. In short, this set couldn't be bought without a lot of gold coins. The price of some of the advanced enchantments could scare people to death. It must be known that half of the strength of senior warriors came from their superb martial arts and strong bodies, and the other half came from these powerful magic equipment. They would do their best to increase their strength, even if they had to be the followers and guards of the archmages. After reading the parchment 5 times, Lady Anastasia finally took 2 deep breaths and forced herself to calm down. Then she raised her head and asked nervously, "Who else knows this method of making salt?" I know. There is no third person. As long as you can keep it a secret and then make up a big lie, I believe that no one will find out for a long time." Andre replied with a smile. "Your family doesn't know?" Lady Anastasia continued to ask with her eyes wide open. She knew too well how precious the craftsmanship recorded on this parchment was, so she had to be careful. She hoped that fewer people knew about it, the better. Andre stroked his chin and nodded without hesitation. That's right. I guarantee that no one else in this world knows about this except for you and me. Moreover, my hometown is far inland in the north. There is no sea and it is very cold. Even if I knew, it would be useless. Lady Anastas stood up, slapped the table hard, and shouted excitedly, "Great." I could already imagine the gold coins rolling in. Now, let's talk about the distribution of profits. I'll be responsible for the manpower, material benefits, and fleet, while you provide the craftsmanship. How about we split it 50-50? Sure, I have a big ship docked at the port. You can use it first. However, I'm going to develop the Tuays Valley on a large scale. I need to buy a large number of slaves, so I'm a little short on cash. Can you dismantle some of them first? The reason why Andre didn't haggle over the split was because he felt that since they were connected by marriage, they were family. No matter how much the Mariel family earned, it would be his one day. The other reason was because he wanted to borrow money. If he wanted to develop the Valley Manor, he would need a large number of slaves. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to make it in time for this year's spring plowing. Even if he spent all the gold coins he had, it wouldn't be enough. Thus, borrowing money was the only way. There was an old saying, if you want to take first, you must give first. After receiving such a huge benefit, anyone would be tempted to be generous, even in the Olyre continent. Lady Anastasia didn't even think about it. She directly asked, "How much do you need?" 120,000 or so. If I'm rich, I can give you more. Andre helplessly smiled and told her about his lack of funds. 120,000? My God, this is really a big deal. Are you planning to develop the entire Valley Manor? Lady Anastasia stood up in shock. As a noble who had received an elite education, she knew the situation in Tuays Valley too well. If it wasn't for the fact that it was too close to the border forest and was often attacked by monsters, beasts, and barbarians, and that the patrols of Lincoln City were too far away to help, countless nobles would have taken over the place. Other than that, another reason was that the population was too small. There were more than 200 families, and about 1,000 people had been forcibly moved from the surrounding areas. If they wanted to develop the valley on a large scale, they would have to invest a lot of money. If they were not careful and encountered a large number of goblins, kobolds, and other monsters, all the money would be wasted. Under normal circumstances, most rational people would take the initiative to avoid risks, especially a place like Tuays Valley that could drag down an entire family. Anastasia didn't understand it all. It was clearly a place that was left to fend for itself. Why would they invest so much money to develop it? Andre saw the doubt and confusion in her eyes, so he took out a simple map and placed it on the table. He first pointed at Lincoln City, then the Valley Manor, and explained in a low voice, "Haven't you noticed? Tuays Valley is only about 3 hours away from the city. If you gallop on horseback, it will probably take even less time. Think about it. If I use the excuse of developing the territory as an excuse to sneak in a group of cavalry and suddenly strike when something big happens in Lincoln City, wouldn't I be able to change the entire situation?" In fact, he had already estimated the influence of the mastermind in the city. At the same time, he also knew that if the mastermind wanted to overturn the city, it was very likely that they would start a mutiny at a critical moment. Since it was a mutiny, the entire city would be in chaos within a few hours. As long as the reaction was fast enough, a group of elite cavalry would definitely be able to catch the mastermind off guard. From a certain point of view, the game with the mastermind was more about intelligence and planning. He believed that the mastermind wouldn't make any big moves in the short term after suffering 2 huge losses. They would move from the open to the dark, and their actions would become more obscure and difficult to detect. This also meant that from now on, a bloodless war had begun. Whoever could seize the initiative would gain the upper hand when their trump cards were revealed. Chapter 147. If taking out the sun-dried salt and marriage alliance was to expand his influence, Then the arrangement of the valley manor was equivalent to a sharp dagger, firmly pressed against the back of the enemy's waist. As long as it was well hidden, it would definitely be able to deal a fatal blow. You mean to buy slaves and soldiers? Lady Anasta had seen too much of the intrigue between nobles, so she immediately saw through the crux of the matter. Normally, it was impossible to keep the recruitment of soldiers a secret. Only by secretly smuggling a batch of slaves through merchants could one hide it from everyone's eyes and ears, and then mixing in 10 times the number of serfs, no one would be able to find out the truth. Andre nodded slightly. That's right. I found that the cavalry of Brant of the Steppe Kingdom is very good. They grew up on horseback, so their horsemanship and archery are needless to say. With a little training, they can quickly become an elite force capable of contending with the city's defense forces. He was planning to personally form a high-speed response force composed of breastplate cavalry and mounted archers, capable of carrying out surprise attacks, harassment, and pursuit. He didn't need too many of them. Only about 300 of them would be enough to change the tide of a battle. Of course, he couldn't afford to have too many of them. Even though he didn't need to pay slaves, horses, breastplates, helmets, bows, sabers, and spears all cost money. Just the heavy war horses alone cost 300 to 400 gold coins. Even if it was just to equip 150 people, it would still cost 50,000 gold coins. Furthermore, the light war horses for half of the archers were not cheap either. If it wasn't for his absolute confidence in Sun Salt, he definitely wouldn't have created such a high-end, classy private army. It must be known that the Green Sea Alliance wasn't a place that produced horses. Whether it was war horses or ordinary horses, they all had to be fed with food. Ordinary farmers couldn't afford it at all. Only rich merchants and nobles with manors and fiefs could afford it. Even the private armies of the four dukes were mostly infantry, with only a small proportion of cavalry. Generally speaking, only official knights were equipped with heavy war horses. Sounds good, but can you afford it with your financial resources? Whether it's slaves, horses, livestock, or poultry, none of them can be bought with a mere 120,000 gold coins. How about this? I have 150,000 yuan in savings here. You can use it first, and I'll help you raise the rest after the first batch of salt is sold in 2 months. With that said, Lady Anastasia took out her notebook, wrote a string of numbers on it, and then stamped it with her personal seal. She tore off the paper and put it on the table. Here, you can get 150,000 gold coins from my housekeeper with this slip of paper. I know all the merchant guilds in the city. Just give them the slip of paper when you pay. Andre put away the note, stood up, and bowed slightly. Thank you very much for your generosity. With this money and the 170,000 gold coins I have, it should be enough. Hearing this number, Lady Anastasia was taken aback. 170,000 gold coins? How do you have so much money on hand? Part of it is the reward for eliminating the pirates, and the rest is the money from selling the barbarian captives. I've done some calculations, and 250,000 gold coins should be enough. The rest of the money will be used for infrastructure. In 6 months, Tue's Valley Basin will become the most sought-after manor around Lincoln City, Andre replied with unusual confidence. Although he really wanted to use a large amount of gold coins to buy scrolls from the Association of Mages and fill up his spell books, it was still safer for him to form a private army. After all, the mages would not be able to play a decisive role in a chaotic battle before they reached level 10. Lady Anastasia's face suddenly showed an expression of realization. Oh, I remember now. Commander Arlen brought back a large number of barbarian captives when he returned. It said that countless slave traders fought over them during the auction. So it turns out that more than half of them belonged to you. It was common knowledge that barbarian slaves were the most popular commodity in the slave market. These warriors from the barbarian lands were not only brave and skilled in battle, but also had simple personalities. After some simple training and brainwashing, they would be able to take on the role of bodyguard and guard. Now, many families in the city were waiting for these barbarian slaves to be trained, preparing to expand their power and influence to deal with the storm that was about to come. No one who could become a noble was an idiot. Recently, there had been one incident after another, and every one of them had a strange aura. Even the middle class had heard the news and began to increase the number of guards they had. That was why the price of barbarian slaves had risen quite a bit. Even Lady Anastasia was planning to buy a few back. To be exact, it's 70%. When Commander Arlen arrived, most of the barbarian warriors had already lost their ability to resist. It's like he's picked up a ready-made bargain. Do you think he won't suffer any losses after fighting with more than 1,000 brave and skilled barbarians? Andre said with a playful expression. Damn it, that bastard took all the credit for himself when he came back. He even said he chopped off Ogre King's head. The city hall even wants to promote that shameless bastard's title. No, I have to go to the council and expose his lies. I'll take back this honor for you. The Mariel family isn't something a commander can bully. Lady Anastasia got angrier and angrier as she spoke. In the end, she stood up agitatedly, wanting to find trouble with Arlen. Andre hurriedly grabbed her arm and shook his head with a smile. Things are a little different for what you think. I was the one who sold Ogre King's head. As an outsider, I've already made a name for myself by exterminating the pirates. If I spread this news, the enemy will quickly focus their attention on me. This will be very troublesome, so I have to keep a low profile for the time being. It's better to leave things like standing in the eye of the storm and attracting attention to others. From a moment he sold Ogre King's head, he knew that Arlen would definitely exaggerate his achievements in this battle in order to obtain a hereditary title. His subordinates would also do their best to flatter him. On one hand, it would add glory to his resume, and, on the other hand, he could make a small fortune. Why not? As long as the other party was willing to hand over all the money that belonged to him, Andre was more than willing to oblige. After all, it was the city hall that should be having a headache, and it had nothing to do with him. Besides, he could also befriend a knight commander who held military power. Even an idiot would know what to do. Chapter 148. You don't want honor? Why? Honor is the most important part of a noble family. The benefits it can bring are unimaginable. Lady Anastasia asked, her face full of confusion. Any noble family would build a small exhibition hall to display their ancestors' achievements for every guest to see. Usually, the more meritorious a family was, the easier it was to win respect. At the same time, it was also a tool for big families to compete with each other. Because these honors represented the contributions a noble family had made to society, the first thing the commoners used to differentiate between good and bad nobles was honor. It was easy to see how important this seemingly illusory thing was. Haha, I'm afraid you've forgotten. Before I became a noble, I was a sorcerer who wielded the power of arcane magic. Most people's attitude towards sorcerers is always one of reverence. They're afraid of supernatural powers they don't understand, so naturally, there's no respect or love for them. Moreover, as a sorcerer's rank increases, this gap will only grow wider. That's why I don't care about honor at all. It's better to exchange it for tangible benefits. Andre chuckled as he answered. From the moment the profession of sorcerer was born, it was destined that ordinary people would never understand or accept it. In their eyes, the ability to control fire, lightning, storms, control people's hearts, and create illusions was no different from that of a god. Only the intelligent sky wealth could understand the complex theories behind arcane magic and use voice and hand gestures to cast powerful spells. Even in the most advanced era of magic, there was a huge gap between the status of commoners and sorcerers. Moreover, the number of sorcerers had decreased sharply, and every one of them was like a rare animal. Training them was even more difficult. In the eyes of the ruling class, even 1,000 commoners were not as important as a single sorcerer. It was because of this attitude and all kinds of privileges that the sorcerers and commoners were in complete opposition. In the eyes of the citizens of Linton City, sorcerers were the symbol of danger. They had the legal right to kill and could take away a person's life at the slightest provocation. In the records of the Sorcerers Association, nearly half of their members had killed someone on the streets. A few of them had even used powerful evocation spells to reduce the entire street to ashes in a fit of rage, killing dozens of people and injuring hundreds of others. How could the ordinary citizens not be afraid of such a group of unbridled espers? How could they not be afraid? From the moment he entered the city, Andre was aware of the status of mages in this city. At the same time, he also knew that unless their immunity from justice was removed, the mages would never be respected and loved by the local residents. Perhaps this was all part of the plan of the nobles. On one hand, they gave the mages a supreme social status. On the other hand, they placed the mages on the opposite side of the toiling masses. This way, although the mages could enjoy a lot of privileges, they would lose their most important foundation. They could only rely on the aristocratic system and would never be able to obtain true authority. Of course, those archmages who were truly immersed in arcane research had never thought of ruling Linton City. They didn't even have enough time to study magical knowledge and conduct experiments. How could they have the time to care about the politics behind the scenes? Only those low-level mages who realized that they could no longer advance on the path of magic would shift their focus to politics in an attempt to obtain a hereditary title for their descendants. However, most of these people were of average talent. Even if they obtained a noble title, if their descendants couldn't become mages or official apprentices, they would quickly decline after 2 generations and fade out of the public eye. In fact, Linton City didn't have a true magic family. Instead, there were a few more famous families in the north that produced mages. It was said that they had the bloodline of ancient times and had mastered many arcane spells that had been lost. In the following time, Andre and Lady Anastasia discussed some things to take note of when drying salt from the sea. In the end, they chose a remote island far away from the sea route. 70% of the terrain there was desert and rocks, while the remaining 30% was a small oasis. It was estimated that it wouldn't be a problem to support 2,000 to 3,000 people. There was a water source, sufficient sunlight, and it basically only rained in June and November. It was simply the best place to build a salt pan. As long as the salt pond was dug, the first batch of salt could be produced in a little more than a week, given the high temperature of the desert during the day. In order to ensure that the secret wouldn't be leaked, Lady Anastasia burned the parchment that recorded the method of drying salt. At the same time, she summoned her butler and a few trusted subordinates and hurriedly pulled out 700 serfs from her manor. They took tools and food and set out to sea on a ship, preparing to personally supervise the production until the first batch of salt was produced. The moment she left, Crowley let go of the sheep. The old butler who stayed behind in the mansion was unable to intimidate this young lady, so he simply entrusted her to Andre. In any case, the two of them were already engaged, so it didn't matter even if a human life was involved. Giving birth before marriage was quite common in the aristocratic circles. In the eyes of the elders, it was a small matter for an unmarried young man and woman to have an accidental fire between them, as long as there was no problem with the child's bloodline. Chloe was quite happy with the old butler's generosity. No matter where her fiancé went, she followed him. She even slept on the same bed at night. Coupled with the temptation of the corset and stockings, Andre almost couldn't control himself and took this young and energetic girl on the spot. But even so, hugging and some intimate physical contact was unavoidable, causing him to be so angry that he couldn't sleep well for 2 consecutive nights. After all, any man with normal physiological reaction would have a strong impulse when holding a beautiful girl in his arms, especially when the two were connected by marriage. Coupled with Chloe's deliberate teasing, it was simply not a normal man's day at night. As a man who had lived 2 lives, Andre was quite open-minded sometimes. For example, when he saved the female knight Serena, he didn't hesitate to make her his woman. When he took the young widow Elsa, he didn't have any psychological burden. Because these 2 women were already adults, they knew what would happen when a man and a woman had sex. Both of them also enjoyed this kind of exercise that was good for their physical and mental health. No one was at a disadvantage. Chapter 149. However, Chloe was different. She was only 14 this year, and a big lowly. Be it her body or mind, she was a girl, not a woman. Orire was similar to the Westerners on Earth, both of them precocious. At 14 years of age, she was already quite mature, and her curvaceous figure made people involuntarily want to possess her. However, Andre really couldn't bring himself to do it. After 2 days of pain and pleasure, he finally decided to return to his house in the slums for a night to recover his tired brain. If this continued, he was afraid that he would lose control and turn into a wolf. What's done can't be undone. After completing another purchase, the fat merchant glanced at the small box of gold coins with a flattering smile on his face. He rubbed his hands and complimented, "You're really young and promising. You should know that I haven't received such a large business for many years. Don't worry, our company will send these poultry and livestock safely to Tua's Valley in 2 days. We will ensure their health. Furthermore, we will also give you a slave veterinarian for free. If you have any more business like this, please come and take care of us. The price is negotiable." "That's for the best. Find Abner directly after you enter the castle. He's the manager of internal affairs that I appointed. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Andre stood up from his chair and turned to leave. "Thank you very much for your patronage. Please remember the Bull Company. We are the most comprehensive livestock merchant in the entire Green Sea Alliance. From hunting dogs to fine horses, whatever you need, we can guarantee that we'll get it as soon as possible." The fat merchant shouted as he waved his arms. After 2 days of frenzied purchasing, the entire Lincoln City knew that a bald youth was wantonly buying serfs, tools, poultry, and livestock, preparing to develop the land in Tua's Valley. Coupled with his extravagant sales, he attracted the attention of the nobles. Of course, these fellows didn't have good intentions. More than half of them were waiting to see him make a fool of himself, while the rest felt that it was a pity. Without exception, none of them thought highly of Andre's actions, believing that it was meaningless. Once the army of monsters roared from the border forest, all their efforts would be for naught. It was definitely not worth it. However, no one knew that among the first 2,400 slaves that set off, 300 of them were cavalry from the grassland kingdom of Brant. These were the last batch of slaves that the merchants had in stock. When they heard that someone was willing to pay for them, they didn't even think about it and sold them together with the serfs and even gave them a discount. As long as this group of people arrived, in addition to the original 50, there would be a total of 350 soldiers in the castle. Moreover, all of them were proficient in archery and riding. They were definitely much stronger than the original Linton City soldiers stationed in the castle. After all, mounted archers were a rather shameless type of soldier, and if they had enough poison arrows, even if the enemy was to break through the gates, they would probably be tortured to death. Upon returning to the carriage, Crowley, who had been waiting for a long time, instantly pounced on him and gave him a passionate kiss. He asked with a smile, "How was it? Did the purchase go smoothly?" "Of course. This is Lincoln City. There's nothing that can't be bought with gold. Tomorrow, we'll go buy a batch of farming tools and seeds." With that, Andre gestured to the coachman. The latter understood and immediately waved the whip in the air, driving the carriage slowly away. "That's great. Does this mean that we can return to the manor tomorrow or the day after?" Chloe excitedly stood up from her seat and clapped her hands. Compared to staying in the city, she preferred the feeling of being unrestrained in the wild. Hunting, picnicking, and fishing were all her favorite sports. Andre pushed the excited girl back to her seat and nodded with a smile. "Yes, according to the plan, we'll return to the manor after we buy everything. But before that, we have to make a trip to the slums. Elsa specifically told me to take a look, so you'll be going back alone today." Chloe's little face fell when she heard that she was going back alone. She frowned and muttered, "Alone? Why can't I go with you?" "Hee, of course you can't. That's the slums. The security at night is very bad. I don't want anything to happen to a cute girl like you." With that, Andre gently lifted the girl's chin and kissed her. He even pried open her teeth and sucked on her silky tongue. After a while, she fell powerlessly into his arms, her eyes blurred. At this moment, Crowley had already forgotten his previous complaints. He just laid there quietly and soon fell asleep. "I'll leave her to you. Make sure she's safe." Andre carefully handed the girl to Eunice. The half-demon took the girl with a tempting fragrance and replied with a playful smile, "Don't worry, my dear master. Your little cutie won't lose a single hair. But to be honest, your kissing technique just now was really good. Maybe you could try it with me when you have time." Andre didn't care about Tayflin's teasing words. He opened the door with small eyes and disappeared at the end of the street in a few minutes. After getting off the carriage, Andre found a small restaurant on the side of the road and casually ate something. Then he walked slowly with his magic pet on the streets of the slums, admiring the last rays of the evening sun. After a busy day, people also went home in groups of 3 or 5. Every resident of the slums knew that they must never travel alone, whether it was day or night. Otherwise, they would soon be targeted by the ubiquitous hooligans and robbers. Men were usually knocked out and sent to the mines outside the city to work until they died. Young and beautiful women had an even worse fate. Not only would they be raped, but they would also be sold to the back streets after they were done playing with them. That was how many women who had lost their way there ended up. Because they had experienced unimaginable torture, they were unwilling to return home and accept the strange looks of their neighbors. Thus, they slowly degenerated and became one of the prostitutes. Although he hadn't lived in the slums for long, Andre already had some understanding of the largest district in Lincoln City. He even had a clear understanding of the few underground gangs. This was because he always had a plan, and that was to integrate these gangs and form his own intelligence system. At the same time, it was also a dagger hidden in the dark. After all, whether it was the nobles in the city or the mastermind behind the scenes, none of them paid much attention to the gangs. With a little modification, these little hoodlums that were looked down upon could immediately be upgraded to excellent spies. When that time came, they would be able to obtain first-hand information as soon as the wind blew. Chapter 150. In fact, this wasn't because the ruling class of Lincoln City didn't have foresight, but because of the development of the social system and the low level of productivity. During the European Middle Ages, the rulers also looked down on these hooligans and villains who relied on petty theft to survive. There was only one reason, and that was that they were too poor. As the saying goes, a poor man's ambition is short-lived, and a lean horse's hair grows long. How much power could an organization that couldn't even fill their stomachs have? Without money, they couldn't afford weapons. Without money, they couldn't afford armor. Without money, they couldn't recruit enough manpower. Would a group of starving commoners armed with sticks be taken seriously by the ruling class? In front of soldiers who were armed to the teeth, they were as weak as chickens, not to mention that there were feudal knights, warriors, mages, and so on in this world. There were many unscientific but tyrannical professions. From a certain point of view, these gangs were indeed vulnerable. They didn't even need the nobles to personally intervene. As long as a lieutenant in the city defense army went berserk, the gangs in the back streets would instantly fall apart. If a gang wanted to be seen in public, the first thing they needed was money. With money, they could hire and train their own professions. Then, through bribery and threats, they could infiltrate the administrative system step by step. When the ruling class began to notice, they would be shocked to find that these inconspicuous gangs were already closely linked to the entire political system. If they wanted to eradicate them, they would have to pay a huge price. In this way, the nobles would turn their original contempt and disgust into mutual cooperation. From there, they would reach the point where they were in each other. One must know that the famous mafia on Earth relied on similar methods to infiltrate the administration, the judiciary, and various industries bit by bit. In the end, they could even control the entire city. It could be said that it was extremely glorious. Therefore, if a gang wanted to develop, the first prerequisite was money. There was a saying that money was the root of all evil. Its power was incomparably strong. It could make the most loyal man choose to betray. It could make the most chaste woman fall. Even the high and mighty gods would choose to compromise under the magic of money. Many merchants who donated large sums of money to the temple would receive a blessing that would prevent them from falling sick for a few months to a year. The duration of the effect depended on the amount of donation. It could be seen that even the gods had to bow their heads in the face of money. Although they themselves did not need these glittering trinkets, they could not resist the need of the church. Nurturing priests, paladins, spreading the faith, expanding the sphere of influence, supporting paladins, and building shrines. Which one of these didn't cost money? Ever since the gods had sealed the entry of the gods into the mortal world, the gods had become more and more dependent on their churches. Some places were even selling amulets that were blessed with divine power, which could enhance the wearer's physical fitness. 600 years ago, such behavior could be defined as blasphemy. Of course, even if they wanted to buy these things now, they had to be believers, at least on the surface. As for whether the merchants were devout or not, only God himself would know. Andre walked while thinking about his future plans. Unknowingly, he had arrived at 60 White Dew Street. Just as he was about to take out his key to open the door, he suddenly noticed two small footprints on the windowsill on the second floor. It seemed to be the work of a child under the age of 10. Burglary, or even murder, was not a big deal in the slums. More than half of Linton's population lived here, and many of them were refugees and beggars who had just escaped from other places. As long as one's hands and feet were clean, the guards would not waste their energy to investigate. After discovering the footprints, Andre's first thought was that there was a thief. However, this guess was quickly overturned. He had been living in this house for quite some time, and with the fact that he had dealt with a few hooligans in the beginning, everyone should know that this place was under the protection of an official member of the Sorcerers Association. Why would a thief take the initiative to look for trouble? Could it be an assassin sent by the mastermind? Just to be safe, he did not hesitate to cast a level one arcane spell, Mage's Armor, on himself. He carefully went around to the window of the kitchen and used Mage's Hand to pry open the latch. He tiptoed into the house, and at the same time, ordered Little Eye to enter a state of alert. As soon as he passed through the kitchen and the corridor, Andre instantly smelled a faint smell of blood coming from the living room, accompanied by a light moan. Through the dim light, he could clearly see a skinny little boy lying on the sofa. His shoulder had been cut open by a dagger. The little guy clenched his teeth and used his tattered clothes to block the wound. Due to the pain, his whole body was soaked in sweat, and his face was especially pale due to the excessive blood loss. There was no doubt that a little boy who was not even an adult could not be an assassin. Not to mention, he was seriously injured. Perhaps he was being hunted down, or perhaps he had provoked someone he should not have. In any case, he was only here to seek refuge. He was not a threat at all. Andre relaxed a little, allowing his familiar to remain vigilant while he strode into the living room. Expressionlessly, he came before the boy and asked softly, "Who are you? Why are you here? What's with the wound on your shoulder? You'd better explain yourself before I lose my temper." The boy, who was still in a daze, immediately opened his eyes and pulled out the dagger hidden behind his back. But when he saw who it was, he immediately threw away the dagger and knelt on the ground with a thud. He cried out in agitation, "Sir Mage, you finally come back. Please go and save the boss. That bastard Gil suddenly launched a raid on our bar with a large number of people. Many people were killed, and the boss was also taken away by them. Please hurry up. They're a bunch of scum from head to toe. No matter how disgusting they are, they will do anything. If the boss falls into their hands for too long, he will be done for." "Boss, you mean Black Lily?" Andre asked with furrowed brows. He still remembered that the last time he met with this gang leader, he had a little conflict with an idiot who seemed to be one of Gil's subordinates. "That's right. Have you forgotten? I even gave you a bag of silver coins." The boy replied emotionally as he wiped away his tears. He knew that as long as he could persuade this seemingly harmless young man, then his boss would be saved. Regardless of whether he could reclaim his territory in the future, at least he would not be trampled on by those scum. Chapter 151. Andre sighed inwardly as he looked at the boy's loyal expression. Black Lily's subordinates were quite capable. They were already at the end of the road, but there was still someone willing to take the risk. Moreover, it was a child. When he thought of that problematic woman with a seductive body, his emotions immediately became complicated. On one hand, she was indeed very beautiful. She also had a unique aura that would attract any normal man. On the other hand, this woman's way of thinking was quite flawed. If he didn't handle her well, it would be easy for him to get into trouble. After all, stubborn people were the most troublesome. Once they set their mind on something, they wouldn't give up until they got what they wanted. But no matter what, he couldn't just watch her be humiliated by a bunch of hoodlums and thugs. Perhaps he could use this opportunity to unify the gangs in the slums. Tell me, where is Black Lily right now? Andre skipped over all the unnecessary details and went straight to the point. He didn't need to make too many preparations to deal with a bunch of hoodlums and thugs. Just the mage armor alone was enough. When paired with a powerful level 3 arcane spell and Small Eye's magic beam, he could easily crush them. Gajil's base is in the innermost part of the back street. I'm willing to bet that he's taken boss there. I can lead the way for you. The boy didn't pay any attention to the bleeding wound on his shoulder. He struggled to get up from the ground and ran for the door. As a child born and raised in a gang, he knew better than anyone that every second that passed meant that his boss was in greater danger. If he was too late, there would be no turning back. Wait. Andre grabbed the boy and tore off a piece of tablecloth to wrap around his wound. He nodded in satisfaction when he saw that there was no more blood. It's all good now. I don't want you to collapse halfway through due to excessive blood loss. These are all small wounds. Don't worry. Saving boss is more important. Please come with me. With that said, the boy pushed open the window of the living room and instantly went out, running towards the chaotic back street. Andre followed behind him unhurriedly, and the two of them quickly disappeared at the end of the street. The back streets were the dirtiest, darkest, and most chaotic places in Linton City. A large number of villains who relied on crime to make a living gathered there. Most of them were forced to do so, but a small number of them wanted to experience the feeling of controlling the life and death of others. Gil Abel was one such example. He was originally the illegitimate son of a minor noble in the city, and his mother was a businesswoman from outside the city. Although he couldn't inherit his father's title and family property, he could definitely live a carefree life with the Chamber of Commerce that his mother left behind after her death. Moreover, with his father's connections, it wouldn't be a problem for him to continue doing business or enter the city defense system to become an officer. But this guy just had to sell the Chamber of Commerce and bring all the money to the back streets. He hired a large number of thugs and directly destroyed many of the original gangs, easily becoming the boss of the slums. Because he never cared about the rules when he acted, and because of his fat body, the gangsters and hoodlums gave him a harsh nickname, Wild Boar. Of course, this wild boar was very different from ordinary wild boars. The most important thing was that he was very smart. Although he had become the boss of the slums in name, there were still 3 people who could threaten his position. 2 of them were twin brothers, and they each controlled 1/3 of the territory. They were also excellent warriors and thieves. Although their profession level wasn't high, they were definitely experts in the back streets, where most of the ordinary people were ordinary people. It was because of this that Gil Abel changed his target to Black Lily. On one hand, Black Lily's strength was relatively weak. On the other hand, she was a beautiful woman, so Gil Abel had always wanted to annex her through marriage. At the same time, he could also get a beauty at the same time. Why not? Unfortunately, he forgot about his ugly appearance and terrible reputation. Even the prostitutes on the streets were unwilling to do business with him, let alone the arrogant Black Lily. Obviously, Gil Abel's plan had no chance of success from the beginning, especially when he learned that his number 1 thug, the Butcher, had died in Black Lily's territory. He immediately felt humiliated. Although he hadn't figured out what was going on, he felt that as the nominal boss of the slums, he had to get back his face. So, he quickly gathered a large group of thugs and raided the other party's bar, capturing them directly. Staring at the hot woman who was trapped on the bed, the wild boar narrowed his eyes with a lecherous look. He raised his hand and gave the woman a hard slap. Slap! Black Lily's charming face instantly swelled up, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. However, she didn't show any fear. Instead, she raised her head and laughed sarcastically. Ha ha ha, idiot. You don't even know who killed the butcher. You don't even know who my lover is, and you dare to hit me? Pighead, you're dead, and you'll die a horrible death. Remember the butcher's head that was like a rotten watermelon. You'll soon be like him. Bitch, are you trying to scare me? Gil Abel didn't show any mercy. He grabbed Black Lily's hair and glared at her with his swollen eyes as he threatened fiercely. Bah, scare you? You'll soon know who you've provoked. After saying that, a contemptuous smile appeared on Black Lily's face. She shut her mouth and refused to say another word. Gil Abel was instantly enraged. His breathing became rapid, and the veins on his forehead bulged. He punched his lower abdomen and roared angrily. Shut up. What an unappreciative woman. I'll personally investigate this matter. No matter who did it, they must pay the price. No one can casually kill my trusted subordinates. No one can. There was no doubt that this guy was furious. He didn't expect that the woman in front of him would still be so arrogant after falling into his hands. Especially that contemptuous look in her eyes. It was as if she was looking at a pile of shit. Anyone with a bit of self-respect wouldn't be able to tolerate such provocation, let alone a ruthless gang leader. Good. Very good. You still dare to show me such a dirty face even now. I'll let you know how powerful I am now. As he spoke, Gil Abel opened his arms and tore off his tight leather armor. His shoulders and back were instantly exposed, and the translucent underwear that was faintly discernible in front of his chest caused his lust to soar. He subconsciously swallowed his saliva. Chapter 152. Bastard, what are you doing? Get lost. Get away from me. Black Lily finally panicked, and she quickly raised her legs to block her front to prevent herself from being exposed. Her eyes revealed a trace of fear that could not be concealed. As a gang leader, she knew all too well what a man would do when he showed such an expression. For any woman, it was a nightmare. Many slum girls with dreams went crazy under such circumstances, and some even chose to commit suicide. Gil Abel licked his lips with a lewd smile. What am I doing? Of course I'm doing you. Bitch, I like to see if you can still put on that high and mighty expression when you're screaming under my crotch. With that, he pounced on her and tore off her clothes, pants, and boots like a wild beast. Even though Black Lily tried her best to resist, her hands and feet were tied, and it did not take long for everything on her body to be turned into rags. Her fair and slender thighs, her small belly without a trace of fat, her round shoulders, her smooth back, all the elements that were enough to make a man's blood boil were all hidden under the tattered cloth strips, which made people feel particularly excited. Ha 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 ha. Resist. Keep resisting. I like hot women like you. Gil Abel laughed arrogantly as he took off his clothes. Just as he was about to pounce on the delicacy, the door to the room was pushed open with a bang. A sturdy young man rushed in and shouted, "Boss! No good. Damn it. What the hell happened? You better give me a reasonable explanation, or your corpse will be in the moat tomorrow." Gil Abel's eyes were bloodshot as he shouted with a ferocious expression. Any man who is interrupted at a critical moment would not have a good temper, let alone a ruthless gang leader like him. The young man was frightened by his boss's fierce gaze, and he hurriedly took a deep breath and explained, "Outside. There's a young wizard outside. He's massacring in the front hall. Our people can't hold on. In just a few minutes, half of them died, and the rest ran for their lives. And he's on his way here. I'm just here to inform you." Ha 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 ha. He's here. He's finally here. Upon hearing this news, Black Lily, who had been crying, burst into laughter. At the same time, her eyes revealed an unforgettable hatred. As a woman, especially a woman who had never been touched by any man before, she hated those men who used violent means on women the most. Therefore, she had secretly made up her mind that once she regained her freedom, she would immediately tear the guy who had tried to violate her into pieces. Mage, they were a group of people at the top of the pyramid in Linton City. He wielded terrifying supernatural powers. With judicial immunity, having grown up in the city, Gil Abel knew the consequences of angering a mage. Even his father, a minor noble, would not be able to escape death, let alone a mere guild leader like himself. Tremble. The fat on his body began to tremble uncontrollably, and a chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and he stood there like a fool. His eyes were lifeless, and he muttered to himself, "How could this be? How could this be?" Seeing his boss so frightened, a trace of contempt appeared on the youth's face. He suddenly struck out and punched Gil Abel's round belly. Then, without hesitation, he kicked him to the ground and took out a rope he had prepared beforehand. It took only 2 seconds for him to be firmly tied up. "Archibald, what are you doing? Do you not want to live anymore?" Gil Abel finally reacted and shouted in panic. The youth called Archibald did not say a word and directly kicked his boss. He then pretended to helplessly spread out his hands. "Sorry, boss. I'm just trying to live. You must know that you've angered a mage. Perhaps your life can be exchanged for ours." Hearing this reason, Gil Abel was stunned for a moment before he cursed. "Traitor! Damn traitor! Have you forgotten who gave you scum food to eat? Who gave you status and status? Huh? Don't make yourself sound so noble. You've always treated us as tools to be used, not humans. If you don't believe me, you can ask around. Apart from brainless idiots like the butcher, who is truly loyal to you? To be honest, we've all been working for bread. Otherwise, with your dogshit methods, you would have been killed many times over. Get a grip on reality. You're just a rich and evil fatty. You're just riding on the coattails of gold coins." Saying that, Archibald gave Gil Abel a fierce kick and stepped on his face. His eyes revealed a cold glint. "Since you've angered a big shot that you shouldn't have, then you should pay with your life. I believe that the mage won't care too much about small fries like us. So, for the sake of the rest of us, please die." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pulled out a dagger and stabbed at Gil Abel's chest. Just as the sharp weapon was about to pierce through the skin, a white light suddenly shot out from the door. Archibald instantly felt dizzy and his vision turned black. He fell to the ground and lost consciousness. A few seconds later, a little boy with a bandage on his shoulder rushed into the room and shouted, "Big sister, are you okay?" "Vincent, you're still alive," Black Lily shouted with a face full of surprise. When the bar was attacked, almost all of her most loyal subordinates were killed, and the fate of the remaining few was unknown. Now that she suddenly saw someone appear in front of her, she immediately became excited. The boy hurriedly ran to the bed and cut the rope with a dagger. He hurriedly explained, "Big sister, of course I'm not dead. I brought reinforcements. That mage is too powerful. He burned the fiercest thugs into charred corpses with a single spell. By the way, why is your face swollen? Why are your clothes so tattered?" At this point, he suddenly realized that his boss seemed to have been violated again. His eyes immediately turned red as he roared, "Damn it! Which bastard did this? I'll kill him. Is it that bastard Gil?" Chapter 153. "Shut up. I'm fine. I was just punched twice. Hurry up and untie the rope. I'll take revenge myself," Black Lily said through gritted teeth. "Understood. That's the rule of the underworld. Whoever suffers a loss will be the one to take revenge." Seeing that his boss's mental state didn't fluctuate too much, the boy immediately understood that she had only suffered a small loss. He hastened his movements and quickly cut the rope completely. As a child who grew up in the slums, he knew almost everything, especially when it came to men and women. When he saw that his boss's underwear was still intact, he knew that he wasn't too late. As soon as she regained her mobility, Black Lily charged forward like a female leopard, ignoring the danger of being exposed. Her fists rained down on Gil Abel's face, and in just a dozen seconds, Gil Abel's face was beyond recognition. Not only was the bridge of his nose completely caved in, many of his teeth had also fallen out, and he was screaming like a pig being slaughtered. "Damn fat pig. Do you remember what I said just now? You're dead, and you'll die a horrible death. Black Lily cursed loudly as she continued to swing her fists. Her hands were soon covered in sticky blood, some of which belonged to Gil Abel, and some of which belonged to her. After all, the effect of force was mutual. When she hit someone, her fist naturally had to bear the same amount of force. That was why it didn't take long for her skin to crack, and in more serious cases, her joints would be injured. Just as Black Lily was getting more and more violent and out of control, Andre, who was standing at the door, finally couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward and grabbed her wrist. Enough. Let's stop venting our anger. If you're still not satisfied, I can provide you with some torture methods. But if you continue, your hands will be crippled. Oof. I'm not as weak as you think. Black Lily rolled her eyes in a fit of pique, but she still listened to his advice. She wiped the blood off her tattered clothes and slowly stood up. However, she had apparently forgotten that her clothes had been torn, so when she stood up, her voluptuous figure was instantly exposed, especially the two peaks that could no longer be covered by the linen tube top. They were standing proudly, and the bottomless cleavage was particularly alluring. Only the tight shorts on the lower half of her body accentuated her flat abdomen without a trace of excess fat, as well as her round and perky buttocks. The slightly sunken part in the middle of her breasts was enough to make any man's blood boil. This stimulating scene made Andre, who was already in his puberty, have a strong impulse. Coupled with Chloe's teasing for the past 2 days, his body had been in a constant state of restlessness. He felt his nose warm, and 2 streams of blood flowed out. Wow, it seems like I'm still very attractive to you, isn't it? Saying that, Black Lily deliberately took 2 steps forward, perfectly showing the curve of her ample breasts. At the same time, she reached out a finger and gently wiped the blood from her nose. Although Andre was a little tempted by this level of teasing, considering that this woman's way of thinking was different from normal people, he smiled bitterly and gently pushed her away. All right, stop fooling around. Your face is so swollen. You better get some cold water on it, or it'll swell up quickly. Also, change into some clothes immediately. There's still a lot of mess outside to deal with. Although it was a little embarrassing to have a nosebleed, he knew that it was because his body had been a little too hot recently, and there was no one event on. In addition, he had been stimulated by the outside world, so it was normal to bleed a little. Hee, it seems that you're a little shy. It's okay, we can take it slow. After all, didn't you appear without hesitation when you heard that I was in danger? Isn't this proof of love? Black Lily seemed to have walked out of the shadow of almost being raped and began to tease Andre. She took the initiative to press her body against his and wrap her arms around his neck. Her eyes were burning with lust. The boy named Benson was quite perceptive. After noticing that the atmosphere in the room was a little off, he immediately and silently dragged the beaten Gil Abel and the unconscious Archibald to the corridor and closed the door behind him. In the blink of an eye, there was only a man and a woman left in the room. Black Lily, in particular, had been taking the initiative to approach him. Unlike Chloe's gentlemanly hints, her behavior was particularly bold. Her 2 slender, fair legs were constantly rubbing against each other, and her entire body was emitting a seductive fragrance. Andre felt his blood rush to his head, and his eyes quickly became bloodshot. He suddenly grabbed the sexy woman in front of him by the neck and warned her while breathing heavily, "You're playing with fire." Playing with fire? Black Lily stretched out a finger and shook it in front of his eyes with a smile. No, I'm trying to protect myself. I'm sure you've seen how cruel the gang fights in the slums are. One wrong step and you'll die without a burial place. Guess what would have happened if you had appeared just a little later? I would have been raped by that dead pig, and I might have become a walking corpse without a soul, just like those prostitutes on the streets. Andre had a general understanding of the lawlessness and chaos in the backstreets. He understood how difficult it was for a woman to become a gang leader, so he nodded slightly. I understand what you mean, but as long as you're willing to help me gather information, I'll naturally protect you. You don't have to do this. No, my dear, you don't understand. Black Lily took a deep breath, and a trace of bitterness appeared on her face. Most of the people living here don't even know how to read, and they don't know what law and morality are. In their eyes, there are only two things worth caring about: food and life. As a gang leader, not only do I have to feed them, but I also have to let them know the consequences of challenging their boss's authority. Perhaps the title of a mage can be a deterrent, but unless I become your lover, some people will have a fluke mentality and think that they can replace you. That sounds a little complicated. Based on what you're saying, the gangsters and hooligans in the backstreets only care about practical benefits? Andre asked with a frown. That's right. These people don't have big goals, and they don't have extravagant hopes of becoming a leader. The reason they work with their lives is simple, and that's to survive. Therefore, their thinking isn't complicated. Otherwise, how do you think an idiot like Gil Abel could become the boss of the slums? It's simple because he's rich, and his father is a small noble. Chapter 154. At this point, Black Lily's eyes shone with a strange light. She tore off her clothes, stood on her tiptoes, and gave him a passionate kiss. She then licked her alluring red lips. Come on, my dear. Possess me and make me your woman. This way, I can become the queen of the entire slum, and you can be my master and lover. Feeling the hot body in his arms, Andre narrowed his eyes and asked softly, You want to unify the underground forces of Linton City? Although he was burning with lust at this moment, and couldn't wait to tear off the last piece of clothing from this sexy woman and pounce on her, his rationality told him that he had to remain calm before he figured out the situation. After all, there was a saying that only a man who could control his lower body could achieve great things. If he couldn't even resist temptation, then he would sooner or later fall. This is the ultimate dream of every gang leader, and I'm no exception. Think about it, my dear. When every thief, hoodlum, and delinquent in the city is under our control, how powerful would we be? Don't you want to gather information? Then you should help me. After saying that, Black Lily grabbed Andre's hand and placed it on her perky buttocks. At the same time, she kissed his neck and ears, licking the tip of her tongue playfully from time to time. She was like a blazing flame, burning herself to her heart's content, and at the same time, causing others to burn as well. Andre closed his eyes and enjoyed the hot lady's caresses and kisses while suppressing the impulse in his heart and continued to ask, How can I guarantee your loyalty? Or rather, what can you use to guarantee that you won't choose to betray me after you've obtained great power? In Orire, wasn't just the men who were heartless. There were countless examples of women who would turn their backs on them once their skirts were lifted. He didn't want to be betrayed by his lover one day, or be cuckolded. That would be too shameful as a transmigrator. As a person who had lived 2 lives and was relatively meticulous, Andre had always been very careful when choosing women. He tried his best to stay away from those scheming cheese. Whether it was the determined female knight Serena, the young and pretty widow Elsa, or the big lowly Chloe who had just been engaged, none of them were women who would secretly find lovers outside. However, it was hard to say for Black Lily, who had climbed up from the bottom of society bit by bit. After all, she had seen the dirtiest, darkest, and most twisted side of the world. At the same time, she had an almost morbid desire for power. Although it seemed that she had feelings for him now, it was hard to say if she wouldn't turn to someone else for more power in the future. One had to know that women were much more vicious than men when they were ruthless. In Andre's subconscious mind, he had always been repulsed by women who desired power. Because in his view, these women were like ticking time bombs. It was better to stay away from them. Black Lily saw the vigilance and suspicion in Andre's eyes. She laughed self-deprecatingly. Perhaps you think that I'm an ambitious woman who would do anything for power. But I want to tell you that all of this has nothing to do with power. My mother was once a prostitute in the back streets. A high and mighty mage, like you would never be able to imagine the terrible torture and humiliation she endured in order to survive. She paused for a moment, and a trace of hatred appeared in her eyes. When she died, I swore in front of her tombstone that I would get rid of all the scum. Then I would set the rules so that all the women in the slums could go out safely without having to worry about being kidnapped or raped. In order to do that, I would need to control the forces of the gangs in Lincoln City. That's a good dream. Although the possibility of it being realized is not high, I like it very much. As he spoke, Andre reached out his hand and gently stroked the slightly swollen face of the sexy woman in his arms. His other hand held the woman's full and perky buttocks and hugged her in his arms. At the same time, he kissed her forehead. He could see that everything Black Lily said was true. It was just that she was a little too idealistic. Generally speaking, this kind of person had a firm will. As long as they made a promise, they would not have to worry about betrayal, unless their ideals conflicted with the promise. However, he would definitely raise both hands to support the idea of reorganizing the gangs. After all, as a local gangster, if they could not obtain any support from the local residents, then they would be like water without a source, a tree without roots. Why couldn't the Italian mafia be eliminated on Earth? It was because they were closely integrated with the local residents. Any old man, woman, or child could be a spy for the mafia. As soon as the police were dispatched, the Italian side would be able to obtain first-hand information and immediately hide everything that should be hidden. In such an environment, what good ideas could the law enforcers have? In order for the gangs to be successful, the first thing was to change their attitude of bullying the civilians in the past. At the same time, they had to let all the residents feel that the gangs could bring them benefits. Otherwise, no matter how well they operated, as long as the city defense forces conducted a surprise inspection, they would immediately suffer heavy losses. Why do you say that my dream can't be realized? Black Lily closed her eyes and enjoyed the gentle caress while she asked with rapid breathing. It was the first time she had such intimate contact with a man. She only felt a burst of numbness all over her body, and she could not exert any strength at all. As a gang leader, Black Lily had long understood the relationship between men and women like the back of her hand. However, theory was just theory. After putting it into practice, she realized that she was a complete newbie. She originally wanted to take the initiative and make the other party completely infatuated with her. However, the foreplay had only just begun, and she had already completely fallen for it. It's very simple. It's because men are creatures that are purely dominated by desire. They always desire more money, more power, and more beautiful women. This is the nature hidden in their blood, and it can never be eliminated. You may be able to reduce the occurrence of such situations through rules, and you may also be able to use punishment to make people fear, but it's impossible to eliminate it once and for all. After saying that, Andre used his nimble fingers to pry open the tube top. With a forceful tug, the two plump breasts were finally freed from their restraints and bounced out. The two pinkish grapes at the top were emitting an alluring scent. He reached out his hand and kneaded it slightly. Then, he leaned down and opened his mouth to suck hard. Black Lily instantly felt as if she had been electrocuted. Her whole body could not help but tremble. Her legs tightened, and a large water stain appeared in the middle of her underwear. At this moment, her mind was blank. She allowed the other party to take over her everything, silently waiting for her to turn from a girl into a real woman. Chapter 155. You're very sensitive. Don't suppress it. Just scream if you want to. Seeing how obedient Black Lily was, Andre, who was already burning with desire, took off his robe and pounced on her. Soon, the room was filled with the sound of a man's heavy breathing and a woman's moans after who knew how long. The two finally stopped, panting heavily on the bed. Black Lily, in particular, was still immersed in the exercise just now. Her body twitched slightly, and her eyes seemed to be in a daze. After resting for a few minutes, Andre pointed at his shoulder and back, and teased with a smile, "You're really a wild kitten. Look at the scratches and bite marks on my body. They're all your work." He had to admit that this woman was really wild. In just 40 minutes, she had left more than 20 bite marks and countless scratch marks on his body. It was as if she had turned all the pain of her first time into lust. Black Lily raised her arm weakly and gently touched the marks she had left behind. She winked playfully. This is a mark I left for you. No matter where you go in the future, no matter what kind of woman you sleep with, you'll think of me when you see these marks. Oh, if that's the case, I should also leave a mark on your body so that everyone will know that you belong to me. As he spoke, Andre stretched out a finger and pointed at the spot between his new lover's neck and chest. An eye-shaped pattern appeared instantly. It was his own secret mark. What is this? Black Lily asked curiously as she touched the mark that was emitting a faint halo. As the leader of a gang in the slums, she knew very little about magic. To be more precise, she only knew the name and price. As for the specific uses, she knew nothing at all. After all, anything related to magic was expensive. It was definitely not something that a group of poor people who even had to save money on food could afford. My mark is equivalent to a protection. Anyone who knows about arcane magic will know that you belong to me. Attacking you is tantamount to declaring war on me. By the way, I still don't know your name. Andre suddenly remembered that Black Lily should be a nickname. He didn't even know the name of his new lover. It was really not enough. Huh. I was just wondering when you would remember to ask for my name. It seems that our hearts are really connected. My name is Bonnie. My mother spent 2 silver coins to hire a scholar to give it to me. It said that it means sweetness, beauty, elegance, and kindness. After learning Black Lily's real name, Andre pulled her into his arms and kissed her swollen cheek. He gently comforted her. It's a very good name, and it matches you. I can see that she must have loved you. 2 silver coins are not a small amount of money. For people who live in the slums, he could feel that his lover had very special feelings for her deceased mother. Every time she mentioned her mother, her emotions would fluctuate greatly. Yes, she loved me very much. She even protected me from a group of scoundrels and was beaten to death in the end. In order to take revenge, I became the best pickpocket in this area when I was 9 years old. When I was 12 years old, I started fighting with a stick. When I was 15 years old, I was recognized by a boss and became a small leader in charge of a street. But this boss didn't have good intentions. A year later, he locked me in a room and tried to rape me. But he didn't expect that I had already prepared a dagger. At this point, Bonnie paused for a moment and a sarcastic smile appeared on his face. When this idiot was busy taking off his clothes, I easily stabbed the dagger into his throat. The whole gang was shocked. Then I went all out and killed 5 more leaders. Finally, the whole gang was under my control. Guess, when I became the boss, what was the first thing I did? Revenge. Make those who killed your mother pay the price. Andre said without thinking. Putting himself in her shoes, he felt that if he was in a similar situation, he would definitely go overboard. He might even fall into the dark side of human nature and become a bloody and cruel executioner. It could be said that it was not easy for Black Lily to maintain her kindness after all that she had gone through. Her persistence was especially admirable. Bonnie nodded with a cold smile. That's right. It was revenge. I found those hooligans one by one and used a dagger to dig out their hearts. Then I fed them to the dogs. Scum like them don't deserve to live. Andre could understand her feelings at the time, so he sighed and comforted her. Well done. If it were me, I would have used more cruel methods. It seems that the chaos in the slums must be stopped. Otherwise, similar tragedies will happen again. The people living here will live in endless fear forever. As a transmigrator from Earth, he was not satisfied with the current state of Lincoln City, especially the corruption of the city guards. It had crossed the bottom line and was unbearable. It took him a lot of effort to suppress the urge to crush all these vermin and scum, especially the ruffian stationed near the slums. Sometimes they were no different from bandits who blocked the road and robbed people. These guys basically didn't do anything in the slums. Sometimes, in order to make more money, they even connived at crime. Many cases of kidnapping and human trafficking were completed under their secret support. As long as they could get a share of the profits, they didn't care whether people died or not. At most, they would pretend to investigate, but the result was, without exception, nothing was found. Driven by the huge profits, part of the city guard stationed in the slums had joined the gangs. After all, the city hall and the nobles never paid attention to this place, so they did whatever they wanted without any scruples. But as the saying goes, where there is oppression, there is resistance. Now, it was time to use another method that did not cross the bottom line of the ruler to rectify the terrible situation. At the same time, teach the ruffians a lesson and let them understand what retribution was. That's right. I want to establish order in this chaotic place. I want everyone to obey the rules I set. Anyone who violates them will be severely punished. Bonnie clenched her fists and said resolutely, "Then go ahead and establish the rules you want. I will support you without reservation." After saying that, Andre kissed his lover's smooth back. He stood up and took out a few men's clothes from the cupboard in the room. Although they looked a little loose, he could only make do with them for now. Chapter 156. 10 minutes later, in the front hall of Gil Abel's lair, a group of fierce-looking thugs knelt on the ground in fear. They lowered their heads and allowed the injured Benson to kick and punch them. They even had to put on a fawning expression as the dozen or so charred corpses beside them reminded them of the consequences of resisting. In fact, these originally arrogant and despotic thugs were already scared out of their wits. They would never forget how terrifying the mage brought by the boy in front of them was. A fireball instantly blew up several of the most powerful guys in the gang into pieces. 2 of them were even professionals. Although they were only level 1, they were still well-known figures in the slums. Usually, even the patrolling soldiers had to give them some face. However, they were no different from ordinary people in the face of powerful arcane spells. They didn't even have time to react before they were sent flying to the ceiling. Blood and intestines splattered everywhere. Now, there was even one unlucky guy hanging from the iron ring where the candles were hung. In addition, the miserable state of the gang's leader, Gil Abel, was also intimidating to everyone. His face was completely swollen like a pig's head, and half of his teeth had been knocked out. One of his eyes was completely blind, and the other was so swollen that he couldn't even open it. He wasn't very conscious either, and he was constantly groaning in pain. The first rule of survival for the gangs in the slums was to never try to go against someone stronger than you. The second rule was that if your boss provokes someone you shouldn't, don't hesitate to abandon him. The third rule was to endure being beaten, scolded, and insulted as much as possible, because living was more important than anything else. These thugs knew very well what to do in order to survive this sudden accident. They couldn't resist or run away, because it was easy to beat up the boy in front of them. However, they would have to bear the wrath of a powerful mage. As for running away, they didn't even think about it. With Gil Abel's forces destroyed, the Black Lily would inevitably annex his territory and become the new boss of the slums. When that time came, they would only need to issue a warrant for his arrest, and he would be caught even if he hid in the sewers. Fierce! Weren't all of you so arrogant when you rushed into the bar? How did they all become cowards without balls now? Bah! A bunch of lowly scum. Just you wait. Wait for Big Sister to come out and settle the score. As Benson cursed, he brandished the wooden stick in his hand and slapped a burly man a few times, causing his face to swell. Ever since he joined the gang, he had only been involved in petty theft. He had never felt so satisfied before, especially when he saw a group of people who used to ride on his head, lowering their heads and not even daring to talk back. An indescribable pleasure immediately emerged from the bottom of his heart. The boy had no idea that this was the thrill of having power and control over the life and death of others. He only felt that the best choice he had made in his life was not to run away, but to find Andre. Otherwise, how could he have the prestige he had now? Just as he was about to find another guy to beat up, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "All right, Benson, the lesson ends here." With that said, Bonnie slowly walked out. Her clothes were baggy and big, just barely covering her thighs. Furthermore, she had deliberately not worn pants. A translucent mucus mixed with blood slowly flowed from her inner thighs to her feet. Anyone who wasn't a fool would know what it meant. Without a doubt, Black Lily was using this method to announce to everyone that she was already a mage's woman. Anyone who wanted to make an enemy of her would have to carefully consider the consequences of angering a powerful mage. It was obvious that none of the gangs in the slums could do this. Even the first lieutenant of the city guard stationed here had to tuck his tail between his legs when faced with a wizard who could use a rank 3 arcane spell. Andre silently followed behind, not saying a word as he scanned the surroundings with his cold eyes. He paid special attention to Archibald, who had betrayed them at the critical moment. This youth gave him the feeling of a venomous snake that would turn around and bite him if he wasn't careful. As a transmigrator, he didn't expect to have any so-called loyal retainers or servants, but he definitely didn't like traitors. After all, no matter the time, traitors were always a group of people who were despised by others. They would do almost anything for their own interests. Of course, these villains usually had decent abilities. If used well, they could often achieve unexpected results. It was also because of this that Andre had cast a stun spell on him instead of blasting his head with a magic missile. Bonnie patted the boy's shoulder and went straight to the middle of the hall. She sat in the seat that originally belonged to Gil Abel and gently knocked on the table as she asked in a low voice, "Who's going to tell me where my men are locked up?" "They're locked up in the sewers 2 blocks away," a thug answered carefully with his head lowered. "Benson, take a few people and go rescue Fatty and the others." "Understood." The boy nodded and used a stick to knock on the 2 thugs beside him. The 3 of them quickly walked out of the hall and ran in the direction of the sewers. After settling one of her worries, Bonnie turned her gaze to the groaning Gil Abel. A cold smile instantly appeared on her face. "Oomph. His vitality is really tenacious. He actually didn't die." "My dear, didn't you just say that there are many punishments that can make people wish they were dead but unable to die? Tell me about it. Perhaps we could try it on him." "Based on his current physical condition, I recommend bamboo skewers, which is to use thin and tough bamboo or wood pieces to insert between the nails. Not only can this cause the target to feel intense pain, but it also won't easily lead to death. It's a very effective punishment." Andre understood that Black Lily wanted to establish her authority, so he cooperated with her by mentioning a method that could make people go crazy. He would not show any mercy to a scumbag like Gil Abel, who had committed so many crimes. "Sound good. You and the 2 of you try cutting a few pieces of hardwood immediately." Bonnie personally pointed at the 3 thugs kneeling in the front, then sneered as she waited to watch a good show. The 3 brawny men looked at each other and sighed helplessly. They took out their daggers and cut a few wooden skewers from the legs of the stool. According to Andre's method, they pressed Gil Abel to the ground. The leader of the 3 gritted his teeth and stabbed a wooden skewer into the gap between his nails. Chapter 157. The excruciating pain caused the unconscious Gil Abel to scream like a pig being slaughtered. His entire body began to tremble violently, and he even began to bang his head against the ground. His heart-wrenching screams echoed in the hall, causing everyone who heard them to feel a chill run down their spines. They couldn't help but shudder, afraid that they would be next. The 3 people who were carrying out the punishment were also frightened, but they still hardened their hearts and inserted all 10 wooden skewers into Gil Abel's fingernails, leaving him to wail in agony on the ground. Bonnie nodded in satisfaction when he saw that they carried out his orders without any hesitation. "Not bad. This voice is really pleasant to the ears. Dear, what other good ideas do you have? Let's talk about them together so that everyone can practice. Who knows, it might come in handy in the future." Second, I recommend pulling out the teeth. The teeth and gums are one of the areas with the densest nerves in the human body. Using pliers to pull them out one by one is enough to make one wish they were dead. Andre said expressionlessly. He knew very well that the reason Black Lily kept torturing her defeated opponents wasn't because of personal grudges, but because she used them as a tool to train her subordinates who had surrendered. She wanted everyone to know how vicious she could be when dealing with her enemies. "Didn't you hear me? Go get the pliers and pull out all the teeth in his mouth. Remember, you must do it slowly." Bonnie roared fiercely at the thugs kneeling on the ground. No one dared to disobey her orders, and they all ran to the warehouse. In less than a minute, 7 or 8 people returned to the hall with pliers in their hands. Without wasting any time, they rushed up and pressed their former boss to the ground. They forced open Gil Abel's mouth and used the pliers to slowly pull out all the remaining teeth. In just a short while, there were more than 20 bloody teeth piled up on the ground. As for Gil Abel, he had already fainted from the pain. His mouth was full of scarlet blood, and he lay motionless on the ground as if he were dead. His clothes were soaked in sweat, and a foul smell wafted out of his pants. There was no doubt that he had lost control of his bladder. As the illegitimate son of a small noble and a merchant, he had always been used to having a smooth life. Even when he joined the gang, he relied on his powerful financial resources to easily obtain the position of the boss of the slums. How could he endure such cruel torture? Andre felt that it was about time. There was no point in torturing him any further. He cast a magic missile, and a dazzling light bullet instantly drew a beautiful arc in the air. Bang, bang, bang. Rank 1 arcane spell, magic missile. Missile hit target's head, dealing 2 damage. Missile hit target, S head, dealing 3 damage. Missile hit target's head, dealing 5 damage. Target's head, Abel's. You have received 15 experience points. Currently unallocated EXP has reached 12,930. With 3 dull thuds, Gil Abel's head was smashed open like a watermelon. White brain matter mixed with blood splattered everywhere. Many people who were closer to him did not manage to dodge in time and were splattered all over. However, they did not even dare to touch it. They just stood there with their heads lowered, silently waiting for the moment that would decide their fates. Normally speaking, when a guild annexed another guild, they would purge a group of people and leave behind a group of people. No one wanted to be the group that was purged, so they were all trying their best to show off in order to gain more chances of survival. Bonnie crossed her sexy legs and gently propped up her chin with one hand. She deliberately put on an unfathomable expression as she sat expressionlessly in her chair. As a guild leader, she knew best that at times like this, she had to keep these people in suspense. She had to make them feel afraid and terrified. Only then could she establish her own prestige. When she gave them some benefits in the future, many of them would immediately be grateful. Although a gang leader sounded a little unpresentable, she was still a leader. Since she was a leader, she naturally knew how to show kindness and authority, and now was the best time to show it. Silence. Absolute silence. Apart from the sound of breathing, there was no other sound in the hall. Seeing the atmosphere becoming more and more tense, Andre knew that it was time for him to take action. After all, they had already discussed it in the room. Black Lily would be responsible for pressuring these people, while he would come out at the critical moment to ease the tension. This way, she would be able to recruit all of Gil Abel's subordinates for her own use, and only then would they be able to swallow 2/3 of the slums. Of course, they did not go into too much detail about how they would do it. In any case, it was just a 2-man show. Staring at his lover's slender legs, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, and he suddenly had the idea of playing a prank. As a person of action through and through, since he had this idea, he naturally had to put into action. He came to Bonnie's side and lowered his head to kiss her slender neck. At the same time, he reached a hand between her legs from behind and stroked her delicate skin. He smiled and said, "All right, let's stop here. I believe they already know what they can do and what they can't do in the future." Bonnie, who was suddenly attacked, tightly clamped the mischievous hand and bit her lower lip hard. With great difficulty, she forcibly suppressed the desire to scream and pretended to be serious as she nodded. "Then we'll listen to you and let it go today. Remember, if anyone dares to break the rules I set in the future, Gil Abel will be the best example. Yes, yes, we promise that we will strictly abide by your rules in the future. Yes, if anyone dares to break the rules, you don't need to do anything. We will punish them like Gil Abel did. Boss Black Lily, we promise to listen to you in the future. Upon hearing that they would not be purged, all the thugs present patted their chests and loudly expressed their loyalty. They were just a group of boorish people who had not studied much, so they knew that everything in the gang was fake. The most important thing was to gain the boss's trust. Enough. If you have the time to talk nonsense here, why don't you go and organize the territory? I'll give you all one night. If you can't come up with a result before dawn, don't even think about having an easy time. Bonnie's eyes widened as he roared ferociously. Everyone was startled by his appearance. They hurriedly turned around and ran out of the hall to patrol the streets. In fact, the reason she was so fierce was to drive them away quickly. Otherwise, she would lose her composure in front of everyone. Chapter 158. Although Black Lily's legs had clamped down on his wrists, she could not clamp down on his fingers. Andre used his nimble fingers to gently rub her skin. Within a few seconds, her entire body was trembling slightly, as if she had been electrocuted. Moreover, with so many people watching, there was a different kind of stimulation. If this continued, she would definitely not be able to hold back her screams. How was it? Did I do well? After watching everyone leave, Andre brazenly put his other hand into her clothes and wandered inside without restraint. At the same time, he kissed her seductive red lips. After more than a minute, they slowly separated. You're such a bastard. How could you do such a thing in public? I almost made a fool of myself. Bonnie blushed and rolled her eyes. Her breathing quickened as she whispered in a low voice. Although she complained, she still allowed his hands to touch a few sensitive parts of her body. She did not have the slightest intention of pushing him away. But you didn't object? Andre pretended to be innocent and shrugged his shoulders. Bonnie almost fainted from anger. She gritted her teeth and cursed. Damn it, there were so many people just now. How could I say anything? Andre felt that Black Lily's current appearance was very interesting. He continued to act like a rascal. If you didn't say anything, how would I know that you were rejecting me? Sophistry. I knew from the first time I saw you that you were not a good person. Oh, you know that I'm not a good person, and you still took the initiative to come to me? I'm willing. What can you do about it? Just as the two were flirting, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside the door. Andre hurriedly stopped flirting. He pulled out his hands and stood there expressionlessly. Just when he thought that the boy had brought someone back, Archibald appeared in the hallway of the front hall. He took 2 steps forward with a resolute face and bowed deeply. Boss Black Lily, Sir Mage, I know a secret. Secret? Bonnie could not help but frown. Let's hear it. What kind of secret is it? Gil Abel was actually just a pawn. He seemed to be doing well on the surface, but in reality, he was being manipulated by others. Speaking of this, Archibald touched his neck with lingering fear. I heard him talking to a mysterious woman in a secret room by chance. From her tone, I could tell that the woman seemed to be a member of some organization and seemed to be planning something. Hearing this news, Andre instantly had a bad feeling. He immediately narrowed his eyes and asked, Do you know what that woman looks like? What's her name? Gil Abel called her the female scorpion. She was about 7 meters tall, and her entire body was wrapped in a cloak. It was impossible to see her face or figure. She wore an unadorned black metal ring on her right hand. In addition, they also mentioned the matter of bribing the city guards. Archibald replied cautiously. He knew very well how much risk he was taking, but in order to get rid of poverty for the rest of his life, he couldn't care less. Control? Infiltration? City guards? No wonder they were able to send messages to the pirates so quickly. Controlling the army. What an ingenious arrangement. Not only can it be done stealthily, it can also allow information to be sent quickly. Looks like I'm not the only smart person in this world. The mastermind behind the scenes has actually seen through the use of the gangs. Andre muttered softly to himself as he paced back and forth with shining eyes. There was no doubt that Gil Abel was a pawn set up by the mastermind behind the scenes. On one hand, he was used to gather information and send messages. On the other hand, he could use money to corrupt the military system of Linton City. The Tuays Valley incident was probably the work of these fellows. Helping the pirates dispose of their stolen goods was probably also the influence of the gangs. It had to be said that this enemy, who was still hidden within the noble system, was rather terrifying. First, he started from the outside, using various enemies to cause trouble for Linton City. Next, he started from the inside, attempting to seize military power from the bottom up. Such a huge plan had probably been laid out 10 years ago, and now he had already extended his tentacles into all aspects of the city. It was fortunate that he could endure for so long. If it was someone else who wasn't shrewd enough, they would have been exposed very quickly. Hearing Andre's muttering, Bonnie's expression changed drastically. She lowered her voice and asked, "You mean I'm going to be in trouble?" "There will definitely be trouble, but I can't be sure how much trouble it will be. Don't worry, with me here, no one will be able to harm a single hair on your head." Andre suddenly turned his head as he spoke, aiming at the shadow in the corner and shooting an arrow. At the same time, he gave Little Eye the order to attack. In a short moment, a steel arrow forged by a blacksmith and a dazzling magical ray flew out at the same time. Just as the other two didn't understand what was going on, a black shadow darted out from the corner with a whoosh. It leapt up at lightning speed, stepping on the wall and doing a somersault, elegantly avoiding all the attacks. It then raised its hand and threw out a flying dagger. A dazzling cold light streaked across the air and hit Archibald's throat. The sharp, flying dagger accurately pierced through his throat, leaving only a small section of the blade outside. Blood gushed out from the wound like a fountain. Archibald's eyes were wide open as he let out a series of strange groans. Soon, he fell to the ground with a plop, dead. Archibald's eyes were wide open as he let out a series of strange groans. Soon, he fell to the ground and died. A perfect dodge. A perfect assassination. Especially the moment when the flying dagger hit its target, the scene was simply too beautiful. Seeing this scene, Andre's pupils rapidly shrank. He immediately shielded Bonnie behind him because he knew that the guy in front of him was a real assassin. His profession should be a thief or a special branch of thieves, such as assassin, rogue swordsman, bounty hunter, and so on. Only these guys could make such flexible movements and dazzling attacks. They were the world's best spies and assassins. Although their direct combat ability was far inferior to a warrior of the same level, their elusive stealth, setting up traps, and poisoning skills were impossible to guard against. The slightest carelessness could lead to death. Even mages were no exception. What was even more frightening was that the level of the thief in front of him was obviously not low. In particular, his flying dagger skills were superb. If it wasn't for the protection of his mage armor, Andre would have rushed to the street. After all, the open space could greatly limit the opponent's stealth skills and assassination methods. At the same time, it was convenient to cast powerful group attack spells. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.